Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone? You are muted, but come back to us. Come back to us, Scott. How is everyone? It's been a interesting few weeks.
Yes, it has. It's been an interesting few days here as well. I've learned a hard lesson that everyone should learn. That is, don't work for 4 to 6 weeks without updating the Kanban board. So, or you sit there closing tickets for 2 days.
Yeah, and then people are going to be like, why wasn't this ticket done before? It's like, it was. It just didn't update the ticket. And that's how they get into trouble.
Yeah, don't tell my boss. Okay, don't tell my boss.
Yeah, too late. Anyway, that's also on me, actually. Anyway, so we've got Matt Carroll joining us in about an hour's time. So, but before then, we're going to get some question Q&A. But before we get to that, we need to go through some roles and stuff. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm pretty sure everyone knows who we are, but let's bring this up. Hi, I'm Simon Lightfoot, community leader and CTO at Dev Angels London, and you can get me on that Twitter handle. Scott.
I am Scott Stahl, community leader, organizer for GDG, and all-around good guy, at least so I'm told.
We do have a Randall, our question magician, in the background here. I think we definitely need to get those slides up there because Randall is now part of the crew. So, yeah, thank you for joining us, Randall. He'll be helping get our questions in.
And everyone should know I have it from a source deep inside the GDE program that they feel Randall has been doing a great job. So even though you don't see his face on camera, the people who send him swag are still very happy.
Those questions don't answer themselves.
That's right.
So, and yeah, let's just go through some quick do's and don'ts. Let's keep this brief, get onto the questions. So again, just a quick thing right now, get your questions in the chat. We want to start immediately with the questions. So don't forget, queue in front of your question and we'll get to it. And we'll help Randall and ourselves easily find it. So
I got a quick question. If Tim Sneath is watching, would we get in trouble if I kick Craig?
Hey, Craig,
I mean,
watch.
All
right, come on, let's get to this bit so we can get on. All right, there you go.
All righty. Folks, be nice, be constructive. Don't be like Craig. I know that it's YouTube comments. Be nice anyway. This is not Reddit. We can have some standards. Don't post anything that's adult, rude, offensive. Don't advertise or promote your business. The big one that we constantly do see is please don't post your same question again and again and again and again. We do keep a list of questions. It is on a spreadsheet. It's very easy to move you to the bottom of the list. So the third time we see your question, that's where you're going.
Vengeance is real.
Yes. And of course, harassment of any kind, incel behavior, bigotry, misogyny, anything like that, you're gone. And if you're gone from here, please do remember we share ban lists with everybody else who are community leaders. And so if you mess up here, you might suddenly find that you can't get onto Slack and a few other places.
So enough of that. Let's get on to the good stuff. Questions.
Yes.
What it's actually, I'm kind of curious, like what has actually been happening? Do you know, do you know what I need to do? I need to read, I should really read Nash's newsletter that he's been doing, all this stuff.
Tell me about it.
He said to me the other day, "You've read it 8 times." I'm like, "I haven't read it 8 times. I barely read it once."
Nash. Thank you, Nash.
Yeah. So I think it's like your email reader opens it up and checks it for spam or something, and that kind of registers as a read.
I don't know. You shouldn't have told him. You know, he was all happy that you kept rereading it, and now you've crushed his hopes.
No, but I did see something. But you know, I've been so busy. I had COVID a couple of weeks back and couldn't come to the show. And then, I got tickets to a BBC recording of some stuff. So I was part of the audience. This was really cool. That was a couple of weeks ago. And then, of course, last week, the week before last, and they overbooked, so I couldn't get in. But I got priority for this last week, and I got in. And it was really interesting to see like a recording. So, you know, that's my news. That's just like, you know, off topic, completely off topic. But yeah, so I've been busy with work, and I have no idea what's been happening in the community the past 2 weeks. Not good.
Yep. Well, you know what? Something that we should probably take a look at now that we have some time. Number one, as you said, what's going on in Nash's newsletter, and there are a number of very popular packages on GitHub. I have unread notifications.
There's also Flutter Tap as well every week, isn't it? Is it every week? Flutter Tap, or is it every month? I think it's every month. I might be wrong. There's also, whatever happened to Flutter Weekly? We should get back to that.
Yeah, we should reach out to Sergey. I know he was having some trouble, having some difficulties there for a little while. So, Sergey, if you are listening, please come say hello.
My phone just told me we're streaming in 20 minutes. I'm like, nope. This is an hour. That's another thing, just so everyone knows. Yeah, this obviously time zones changed, and we're doing this as a 9 a.m. PST slot. So because time zones, DST, ST, whatever, summertime, an hour changed. Sorry, I didn't know until literally 10 minutes before the show. I was like, Scott was like, you know, we're starting in 10 minutes. I'm like, an hour and 10 minutes.
No, see, and the thing is we had this problem last year. So that's why I was very careful to call Simon 10 minutes ahead to make sure he would be here.
Thanks.
But hey, one of the things that we can touch on, since we've got some time actually, is what's happening in Flutter. Of course, is there are trending repos. And okay then. Apparently, I may need to
make the size bigger.
Yeah, that.
It's actually So there's a weekly trending. There's a trending bot on GitHub that I actually signed up to quite a long time ago. I get these notifications and I completely ignore them at the moment. So I should probably sort that out.
There we go. Took a little bit of doing there.
That's smaller.
Oh, that's not smaller. Is it smaller?
Yeah, you need to zoom in. Control plus.
Too complicated, right? No.
There you go.
All right.
What's you're on the weekly, right? So wow, 2018.
Yes. Well, this is weekly trending repos in Dart.
Yeah, you can go to this. This the GitHub thing at the top there. Move your thing out of the way. Underneath, yeah, there we go.
That's who it is.
Yeah, but then the repos next to it, GitHub-trending-repos.
Yes,
and
but you can't get there if you don't know who.
Issue 103 is for Dart, and they have one for each different language. He's got like a bot that goes in and updates. It's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So this was 27 days ago.
Go to the bottom. I think the most recent one's at the bottom.
That's fun. Yeah, because I was just looking at Yes.
6 days ago. The algorithms. Oh yeah, all algorithms implemented. That's pretty cool. I saw that. Who posted that? I think Nash or someone posted that on Twitter.
If well, let me see here. I'm going to need to change the share to do that, I think. Nope, it's here. Algorithms in Dart is from Stefan Sean. So,
last committer. I think it's. I don't know who. If it might be him or someone else.
But yeah, for everyone who is, I don't think they changed the algorithms though, even if it was 2021. So if you are looking to do a job interview where you're worried about your data systems and algorithms, there you go.
Material Color Library, Material U, by the Material Foundation.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What else we got here? Flutter Responsive Admin Panel Dashboard. Interesting. Pawan.
Pawan has updated his examples.
Nice.
There you go. Very cool. Safe. Image is a self-hosted photo and video backup solution directly from your phone. Cool.
Interesting. Flutter plugins repo, obviously gaining popularity, always gaining popularity. Instagram Flutter clone, probably good to look at that.
Clones. No one ever does clones.
I know, right? Code Labs, more Code Labs.
Ooh, nice. Definitely have to check those out. Might actually learn something. Combat projects?
This is kind of like this table calendar one. Highly customizable, feature-packed calendar widget for Flutter. Like calendars in general are difficult, right? Like I think I tweeted not too long ago. There was this guy who was trying to work out the difference between two date timestamps. It turns out that at some point in time, let's say the UK switched from Julian to Gregorian calendar. I don't know, 1,000 years ago. I don't know, whenever it was, right? It's not that long ago, but you know what I mean. Like the calendar switched, right? And we skipped 3 months. It went from the start of the year being March to the start of the year being January, right? Or something like that, right? Like that's the way the calendars work. But it turns out iOS only works with the Gregorian calendar. So basically the timestamp that was being reported by iOS was completely different to the one being reported by the backend system or another system. And just one thing you don't want to deal with, like time zones, date time, like all of that, anything that involves like history or human stuff, like it's always going to go wrong. It's always going to go wrong. So yeah.
Wait, you're telling me that Apple implemented something their own way instead of the way the rest of the world does it?
They would never do that. They would never do that.
Not at all.
And then obviously Beamer, a great routing package as well. So that's
yeah, I don't. Okay, all these routing and navigation packages are coming out at the same time.
No, Beamer's been out. I think it's a Flutter favorite as well, Beamer. I think.
Okay, let me take a quick look
I think it was one that I reviewed. It was a while ago.
Well, it's certainly current. 8 days ago, it was updated.
Scroll down. I think it's got the badge. Yeah.
Yep, Flutter favorite.
Yep.
So there we go.
Actually, talking about this, we found that someone had duplicated Flutter blur hash package from the community, and it kept the community badge. So we're gonna be updating some of those things because obviously it's not the cloned package is not a community package. It's not managed by the community. So I think we should, same thing goes with that. You expect people to remove those kind of things because they're not in their forks or something, but this guy didn't. So. Anyway, right, should we go on to some questions? I hope some people have been putting their questions in the chat. Let's see where we go with this.
There's a comment right here. I'm a little confused by that one. I mean, unless the system's totally automated, I would have thought somebody would have at least run the program. So people, could you check that out and let us know if you're having problems with it as well? All right. Questions.
Should I bring up the first question?
Sure.
Which state management plugin is better? Whatever one you want. There you go. Simple. There's no better, right?
Almost whatever.
Yeah, almost whatever. But to be honest, it's whatever works for you. Research, because again, state management is, we've said this before, and I'm not going to stay on this topic because most of the people here watching probably already heard this a bazillion times, and that is state management is not necessarily just managing your state. It's like architecture. There's other things that go into it. Yeah. And another day, another state management package, right? Like let choose research. If it works for you and it works for your application, use it. Done. That's it. Simple. Like there's not, you're not gonna, yeah. If you at a later time, if let's say you're working with a management solution and it doesn't fit your needs anymore, change your solution, right? Like it's not rocket science.
I'm waiting for
I'm
this.
not putting anyone down here. I'm just saying that
yeah.
Pick, like, do some research, pick the one you think is best, and then for your use case, and then if it doesn't fit anymore, change it, right? Like if you haven't encapsulated your code correctly so that you can change it out, then that's the, you need to improve on that, right? Don't just throw a state management solution all across your app and expect it to be easy to be removed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can encapsulate your code, different ways to sort of allow you to exchange out whatever functionality you need.
I'm waiting for Linux to go into stable, and as soon as it does, I'm going to write my own state management solution. Okay, a little callback to SUSE Linux there.
Yeah, what was it? Yeah, another compiler.
Oh, God. But as far as state management goes, it's not so much that's best. It is, though, that some are better for certain situations than others. Redux is not good for a small app. That's pretty simple.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think Redux is great for a large app, in my opinion. But this is the thing, like at the end of the day, right? Like, you do your research. There's no point us saying one thing because it would be based on our opinion about the research that we recently remembered. We would go, if we wanted to make another choice, we'd go research what are the most recent state management solutions. What are they? I think I would probably, at the moment, the last one I saw that was really good, Majid from the community did a really good talk at DroidCon London 2021, so last year, October. And the video is open to the public. You can go grab it. And he discussed like every state management solution in his talk. So go learn about them. Right.
One thing I will say, though, Provider does not make it easy to access your state changes outside the widget tree. That is why Remy wrote RiverPod in the first place. One of the really big reasons. And actually, you can get unidirectional. One moment. You can actually get unidirectional data flow, but it does not have time travel in other things. So it is easy to debug. You can set up unidirectional data flow very easily with all the state management systems, but you do lose time travel. So
who wants to travel in time? So
okay, where is we here?
Let's go top down. Next one.
Yep, there we go.
Any background services available in Flutter like cron job? Yes. There you go. So there's actually a package by the community called Work Manager. I'll get the link and put it in chat. That's just one of many options. The operating systems allow you to do this, so you can do it. There you go. It's in the chat. Packages Work Manager, and I'll bring it up on stream. This one here. This is run by the community, and it allows you to execute tasks in the background, set up a task in the future, all that kind of good stuff. You can even say like things like when you go onto Wi-Fi, run this thing. So a backup task or something. There's lots of options. This is nothing to do with Flutter, right? This is platform behavior. So it's down to the platform.
I mean, it's helpful for Flutter devs to know how to set this up.
Oh, for sure.
Not everyone came from mobile. We have to remember now we're going to have people coming from web,
desktop,
and desktop. Yeah. So if you're a Flutter developer and you're out there speaking and giving talks, you may have to change the way you're doing things. If you have been talking as if you're talking to all iOS and Android devs, people who understand a lot of these things, people coming from web are not going to understand what we're talking about in a lot of things. And there are people who look at how easy Flutter is to do. So they're going to try their hand at front end. They're going to try their hand at making things you can see because they've been doing things behind the scenes a lot. So I've had a lot of C# devs who've been working back end in .NET come up and say, hey, they want to do Flutter. Okay, fine. But these folks have no idea what material design is. They have no idea about color palettes. They have no idea about touch targets. They have no idea about any of this stuff. And then web design people, a lot of those folks are going to have to start out with what is state management. I mean, I've seen people who don't even know what a callback is, but they're experts in what they do. So we're going to have to be ready for all sorts of stuff here. So let's see here. Salih's got an interesting one for Simon.
When will you do a Flutter version of Elden Ring? Never. It'd take me. If I was to try and do that, I'd be probably releasing it when I'm like 80, but I finally did it.
Skyrim, Simon. You need to port Skyrim.
I don't need to port anything. It's kind of. I was actually just thinking about that question. Like, there's no reason. I mean, people like the Dart language, right? There's no reason why you can't write something like that in Dart, right? I don't know. I have seen no performance benchmarks for that kind of thing. No one's done it before. But theoretically, there's no reason why you couldn't do it. Like, you still have FFI, so you can go run OpenGL operations from your desktop computer or from whatever unit you're on, and you can go make a game engine and do whatever you want to do, and nothing in the language we say or the way it all works should stop you from building something like that. It's just, like, you need to do some performance benchmarks before you start going down the avenue of implementing something like that. I don't know what the overhead would be. I don't think it'd be too bad, but fun times.
Alrighty. Grid is really hard in Flutter.
Grid?
Depends how you do it.
Displaying a grid?
There's a widget for that.
There's lots of widgets for grid stuff, like table, for example, would give you a nice grid. I mean, it depends on what. See, here's the thing, right? Like, people would like. I think it's one of the things like that grid view itself uses aspect ratio of the child, right? Which is not what people kind of expect. And then you've got like grids in general. I'd say here's the thing, right? A grid in general is actually a hard thing to lay out. I know it doesn't sound like it, right? But it's actually, there's a known problem. I forget the name of it. It's what table in the original HTML standards had, where you try and merge cells and have other things be equal, and then you have remaining space you have to lay out. It gets really, really complicated. So one of the interesting things is if you just want like a grid so you have rows and then you have rows inside a column, essentially, right? You give yourself a grid. But if you want each cell to be equal to all the ones underneath it, but you want it to recycle, well, that's not possible because those views don't exist on the screen yet, so it can't work out the width. So when they come onto screen, the width changes and then it would make it larger. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So, in fact, there's was it Rose? Renan from the community worked on a piece of software called Rose, which is written in Flutter, which is literally like a spreadsheet software. The entire app is related to rendering and building and using spreadsheets. Like, it's a problem in itself. So yes, grids are hard, but in general, depending what you're trying to do, right? For most use cases, a simple grid view or a table widget with table row will do what you want it to do. So just to be clear, grid view recycles its views, so it will just bring on the views as it needs them, and then a grid, a table has to load all of its children to work out its layout, and render them, which can obviously be, you don't want to do that with a huge number of widgets, and obviously there's also table, row and column, but then you get unequal cells perhaps depending on what you're trying to do. There's lots of options. Right. Should I crack on with the next question here? Let's see, what do we have? Does Flutter require Mesa 3 or higher?
I thought that said OpenGL 3 or higher somewhere.
Well, no, there's another one. I think the same person has said OpenGL 3 or higher. It doesn't. Mesa is actually the Linux. It's the package, isn't it? Isn't it the package that's used for the Linux desktop stuff? I actually don't know what the minimum requirements are from a graphics standpoint on Linux desktop. For Flutter, yeah, it is Mesa 3D. Okay, that took me back. Open source implementation of OpenGL, Vulkan, and so on. Yeah. I mean, again, it comes up with this OpenGL 3. It works with. Was it 2? I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like 2 ES, I think it was, or higher. I can't remember. It's definitely can work on less. In fact, Flutter itself actually has, depending on how you're using it, it actually has a software renderer if you really wanted to do that. So, require, no, in short. But yeah, if you want performance, obviously, the better your hardware acceleration, the better it's going to be, in essence.
I'm looking up something here for the next one.
What, the periodic timer one?
Yeah.
I'll read it off. I need to have a timer.periodic start when the user is on a certain screen and stop it when they leave the screen. Where should I put the code to do both of those? I mean, so there's actually an interesting widget called visibility. Not
visibility detector.
Yes, that's the one.
Don't confuse it with visibility.
I was literally about to correct myself. It's the Google widgets library. So it's not a first-party package. Do you know the one I'm talking about, Scott?
You mean that one right there?
You're gonna have to zoom in. That is teeny tiny.
Well, you can see visibility detector, right?
Yeah, there we go. Visibility _ detector. Yeah, that's it. Google.dev. That's the one I was thinking of. This will actually give you callbacks when something becomes visible. It's quite nice when you're scrolling. Like you can put this in cells in like a list view, and then when the item comes on the screen, it becomes visible and partially visible when you get different classes. So yes, you can do that. To be honest, if you're doing it on a certain screen, normally it's just on a widget. So the widget gets created. So you make a stateful widget in an init state. You can periodic start, and then you stop it when they leave the screen, which can dispose. Now, let me caveat this. There's a really great something that most people don't know actually. So I'll share this. You have ticker mode. There's a widget called ticker mode, and what it allows you to do is, in fact, if we bring up the Flutter. Yeah, there's a widget called ticker mode, and it actually has like an ticker mode.of. Yeah. So basically, it allows you to disable animations for a subset of your UI. So you do ticker mode, and you can set enable to be false. So there's a widget for that, right? Yeah. Anyway. Can you mute your mic for a second?
Oh, you can hear her. Sorry.
Oh yeah, we can definitely hear.
Let me take care of this. This is a puppy, not a puppy, but older dog, and she has needs. I'll be right back.
Does Randall want to join us on the stream? I can't hear you, Randall. But should I bring you up? Is it got a thumbs up? There we go. We have a thumbs up.
Hey, welcome back to the world. Yes,
yeah.
I've been horizontal for about 2 weeks, which is not good, and now I'm sort of vertical. So I'm only operating about 80%, but we'll see how that works.
So is that 80% vertical or horizontal?
Well, 80% of what I normally do vertical. Right, it's true. It's true.
So
yeah, that's right. By the way, for everybody behind the scenes or everybody watching the show, I've been behind the scenes, basically making sure that Simon and Scott get to see your questions. So we have a strategy for that, and it works really well. So
let's see if I can.
So what are you asking the question of here?
So this question was about. Let's see if I can get this to come up. Yeah. So there's this widget called Ticker Mode, and it allows you to say you can use this enable and disable around the UI to turn off animations. So animations use tickers. Now, what's really important about this is that you can actually listen to this. So inside of your did change dependencies on your widget, you can do ticker mode.of, and it gives you back if it's enabled or not. Now, this will then register, because it used depend inherited widget, it will register your widget. And if the ticker mode changes above your UI, it will rebuild your widget and call the did change dependencies. And then you can turn off, in this case, the user's periodic timer. You can disable it. This is the correct behavior. So this way, if you have a stack of UI, let's say you got like a tabbed UI. When you switch tabs, the tickers are disabled on the tab that's off screen,
right?
And therefore your periodic timer stops, right? So that's another way of dealing with this.
So you're saying the original questioner can hook into this particular hook and figure out when he's supposed to be shutting off and shutting on.
Yeah.
Shutting on, whatever that
basically
means.
Yeah. So tickers are based. So to be clear, the difference between a timer and a ticker, which can be a little bit confusing. Timer is part of the Dart runtime, and it's about something on a time iteration. So do something in 1 minute's time, or do something every second, or whatever it is. Whereas ticker is per frame, right? So that's very much linked to the rendering side of things.
Right, I've done stuff with that, yes.
So basically what I'm suggesting is you can link the two pieces together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right, let's see what else we got in the pipeline.
Oh my goodness, I'm in a Q&A chair now. All right, go ahead.
Can you run Dart on Cloud Function? Raz.
Yes.
Raz knows this.
Yes.
So you can't, as far as I know, they haven't directly supported Cloud Functions per se. However, you can do it on Cloud Run. Cloud Run actually supports functions. So there is a functions framework package, and that is the official package for Cloud Functions with Dart, and they have a list of what is supported on there. So let me just bring that up. It's this package here. And the community support project, Dart, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so currently Cloud Run, Google App Engine, and Knative based environments. Google Cloud Functions does not currently provide official support for Dart runtime, but we're making it work on Google Cloud Run as seamless and symmetric experience as possible for the Dart Functions framework projects. In short, the new version of Google Cloud Run actually supports events. So what would actually happen is normally you would say, let's say, I'll give you an example. In a Cloud function written in, say, JavaScript or TypeScript, you might listen for an event that says when this Firestore collection, a document gets added to this collection, call my Cloud function. And then you get the resource information, and you can say, okay, go read the database and do some logic and update the record, or do some magic, right? So that can still be done with Google Cloud Run. And there's a thing they call event arc. I'll put that in the chat, event arc. And that is the system of pushing events to your Cloud Run instance, and you can just turn it on. It's called event triggers, I think, if I remember rightly. Yeah, you can go look up event triggers in Google Cloud Run, and it means that you can actually listen for these events and still receive them in your Dart code and process them. And the functions framework helps you decode the JSON and process those events. and it will automatically call a function in your Dart code. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. We're getting a really
And
good
actually,
variety of
Oh, he's back.
questions.
I am back, and just a moment. I happen to have it on very good authority that there is another way to handle this. And let's see here.
Yeah, true, right? Like, the problem with this, it's nice, right? And you can run Dart, and we've done this. In fact, I remember at the very, very beginning when Dart, we first started looking at Dart on running it on Cloud Functions, is we were doing this, right? Like when I think it was when Dart Web first started coming out, and we had the Dart to JS, or was it before? It was before Flutter Web. We have had the community, that is, people from the community have had Cloud Functions running with Dart using the Dart to JS. However, you're now dealing with JavaScript, and your errors are in JavaScript, and then you're dealing with that type conversion, dealing with other issues. It just adds more complexity, and that's what you don't need, right? The nice thing about using Cloud Run and something like, I think someone actually mentioned this in is an upcoming question, which is Server Pod or something like that, is that it provides you with like a better logging experience. You can log when problems occur and track them down easier and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I shut up.
You know, it's I spend entirely too much time trying to troubleshoot the JavaScript results from a web browser. It's I've got a really mean boss who has me working on Flutter Web all the time right now.
So sorry.
Moving on. Go on. Did you want to add something?
Well, also, I did want to say as a meta comment that we're getting a lot of the same questions twice. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Nope.
Don't do
You
that.
get moved to the bottom.
We just ignore you at this point.
We've only got 20 minutes left before Matt gets here. And if you keep repeating your question, you get put at the bottom. Then we don't have time to get to your question. And then you typed it over and over again for no reason.
Exactly.
Right.
Please stop that.
Let's carry on. And Neil said, will Dart ever have a TensorFlow library? It does. Doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, TF Lite. Yeah, it's called TF. It's TF Lite, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what do you want from TensorFlow? You want the ability to run a model that's already been produced up in the sky.
There you go. TF Lite, TF Flutter, and TF Lite Audio. There's a bunch of libraries. And
okay, MA, you just asked the same question twice again. Stop that. Do not ask the same question twice. We can't.
So there's a bunch of TF Lite related stuff that will help you out.
Yep. I mean, it was a worthy question the first time, but now it's going to the bottom of the pile.
Any thoughts on ServerPod? I actually haven't looked at the code for ServerPod, but I heard about it. Looked at the webpage. Looks interesting, like an interesting project, and it's something that we definitely want to. Well, I definitely want to look into further. There's been a few times that we've seen these server libraries around. Oh, what's that? Oh, we lost the question. Yeah, there's been a few times where there's been these server libraries. So was it Aqueduct? What was one of the other ones that we had going around for Dart and server side? There was Angel.
Conduit became the result of Aqueduct, or no, Conduit became the result of Angel, I think.
Yeah, so there was Angels, Aqueduct. There's a few different libraries like this that were designed to support a server side, and I think that they went the way of the dinosaur. So I'm hoping ServerPod is a refresh of this, and we're going to see something stick around for like a larger for a larger audience. It looks really nice. I like the idea on their homepage. They had like this logging desktop app. I like the idea of like being able to develop and having like a really nice dev experience where you kind of got the logs of what's actually happening, and the visual tool be able to filter it and being able to access it. It's kind of got some interesting stuff going on.
You know, we haven't announced this yet. In fact, I'm not sure if Simon's even aware of it, but we have a guest already lined up for next week. And we are going to be talking about something I think that will answer a lot of these questions, and that's full stack Dart. Okay, we're talking about Dart from front end, which we're already doing, all the way to server, including cloud functions and anything else you can name. So end to end, only Dart. And the same guy who happened to tell me that about cloud functions is the one who's going to be here, Kevin Moore from the Flutter team. So you're going to learn about full stack Dart straight from the source.
Return next week.
Yes. Put it on your calendar. Humpday
Straight
Q&A.
from Kevmoo, our friend.
What's the next question here?
After watching Flutter versus Zombies, oh, I'm sorry, you watched that? I tried drawing a 3D cube on a canvas using the cube generator from Vector Math. How do we generate the necessary vertices object to draw?
I haven't even looked at the cube renderer. I don't think. I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I think the cube renderer takes like. Hang on, I'm going to take a quick look here. If I remember right, with the cube generator, this generates like a floating point cube. Essentially, what you need is I'll tell you what you're missing. If you want to have a go at this, once you have your cube generator, you should have vertices from that. The vertices object you're talking about is a UI vertices object that is the one you render on the canvas, and what you need to pass across are the vertices, indices for triangles, and that is what my renderer does. So you're saying how to do that? I mean, I would suggest you go look at inside Vector Math. You'll find there's a make projection matrix or something like that. I forget the name of it. Yeah, make projection matrix. I feel like it's that. I can't find it. Anyway, set perspective matrix. Yeah, set perspective matrix is a top level function. Basically, what you're doing is you take all your vertices from your cube generator, push them through the matrix generated by the perspective matrix. That provides you now a set of coordinates that are perspective matrix, and then you multiply those by the width and height of your canvas, and then you're putting them into your vertices object because they're two-dimensional coordinates that have been essentially you're converting. By the way, once you convert them through your perspective matrix, you're taking just the x and y from your vertices. And that should give you the coordinates for your canvas. Hope that helps. It's a bit technical. Just a bit.
Next one. Okay. How to avoid using build context deep within. Well, don't. Okay. Context is your friend.
Yeah. Oh, what was the question? How to avoid using it?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you avoid using it?
Yeah, don't do that. Context is your friend.
Dictionary whilst working with. Why would you avoid using it?
I don't know. Build context is your friend. Live it, learn it, love it, marry it. Okay.
Put a ring on it.
Put a ring on it. Because between build context and mediaquery.of, you have a wealth of information about what's going on with your app on any given frame. It tells you everything, just about everything you could need, for sure. So yeah, never try to avoid build context. Just get comfortable with it. If you want to know what is the color of headline 1 in your text theme, it's in the build context. And you can turn around and make little changes like doing default theme.merge to make changes in your, default text theme .merge to make changes in your text theme. You can do so much with the build context. There's this trend to try to avoid it. It's a bad idea. Period.
I think this comes from sort of Android developers and context, and say not pass around the context. I mean, you definitely don't want to pass, like, your build context is your context, right? So what you want to do is use if you want to pass something to, like, say, I'll give an example of what's a common use case for this, right? That I can think of off the top of my head, which people do. And that is they go off and do some asynchronous operation. And when the result comes back, they want to do something with the UI, like display a message or something, right? What you actually should be passing there is a function, a closure, right? Like a Lambda expression over to your backend. And once it finishes doing its thing, it then runs that code. And that code can then go, is my widget mounted? That means the build context is valid. And then you can then say, oh, context of get the localization or display a message or show a dialogue or whatever it is that you want to do, right? The point here is you don't pass the build context to your backend and expect it to use it, because it might become invalid during the asynchronous operation, for example. So it's subtle differentiation, and it also gives you good encapsulation. Anyway.
Okay. Here we go. A little bit of a follow-up.
For example, avoiding build context and services, especially using. I don't get it. You do localizations of, and get the localizations from your build context. You're displaying text, right?
Does that make much sense?
No, I don't remember. I'll have to go look it up. But
it's all clarifications there. We're working on it, but it's. Yeah, it's
also right.
It might be one of the differences between Flutter and Android right now. That's another possibility.
No, yeah. Can't see anything specific here. Anyway, okay. Right, let's carry on.
Yep. Is it possible to have different behaviors? Permissions. Would that be a permissions issue?
Okay, hang on. Is it possible to give a special behavior for one screen by bridging Dart and native, like prevent screen recording only for? Yes, there you go. It is possible. Sorry, that's what it was asking. Is it possible? It is possible.
But that's
how. There's I've actually done this for an app. I can't give you the code. But what you want to do is go look up what's it called? So in Android, it's I don't know if there's a package on pub.dev. Someone might have made a package now, but on Android, it's set. You go to your activity and do set window flag secure, and it basically makes the window surface a secure window surface, which prevents it from being recorded. It's the same as.
So this just sounds like a simple matter of a method channel.
It is indeed, yeah. So basically, you're basically taking advantage of your native, and on iOS, you get you change the UI based on. What's this? Is this a follow up? Can we easily?
It's a totally different question, but it was next, and it's probably the same answer.
Can we dealing with the platform like Android? Yeah. So in pure Dart, so can we easily service or broadcast like Android? In fact, there's an Android intent package which lets you find that, but it's never going to be a pure Dart because Dart has nothing to do with Android or iOS, right? It's Dart, it's separate. But you go.
Well, I think they mean if the developer only has to write pure Dart.
Yeah, I mean, but that's only if a package already exists. But the point here is it's still going to take advantage of the native platform, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not in the classic sense here. The thing is that statement, we've gone over this a number of times. The state management solutions kind of some of them have architectures built in, such as Redux and block pretty much have architectures built in. The one thing I would say is try to package as much as you can by feature instead of by type. But when you start getting widgets that are used all over the place, you probably do want to have them in a common widgets folder, which then it begins to become a hybrid packaging by feature versus type.
I also never forget that you can refactor, right? So you're never going to stick with one architecture. You do it, and then when it doesn't make sense anymore, change it, right?
And if you're looking for an answer like MVVM, MVP, basically all of those are valid, but they aren't. It's like wearing a shoe that's a little bit too big or a little bit too small. It will work. It will work pretty much just fine.
Those patterns are really aren't derived around reactive UI, right?
Exactly.
Declarative UI and reacting to the UI is something that is definitely not what those concepts were designed around an entirely different process. So you can get them working. In fact, the one that works, I think, similarly as best as MVI, model view intent, but still, like there's a bunch of these things, and it's like I don't think they're all good, right? Like
the thing is, what you really need to realize and what you need to think about is there's basically 4 different things in a graph. One is you have a UI that's just sitting there. It's completely static. It's doing nothing. This is even in an animation because an individual frame is doing nothing. It sits there. It's waiting for an event. The event could be a button press. It could be that information is done loading. It could be a completion of an asynchronous operation. It could be the ticker for an animation ticking one time. Okay, that's an event, which will then cause your logic to run. Your logic will then change the state of your object. And because an event happened, it will rebuild a new frame based on the new state. And then the UI is just going to sit there again and wait for another event. So that's really it. The UIs are always static, even in an animation, because it's just sitting there waiting for something to prod it and say, hey, go make another frame. And in the case of an animation, of course, that's a ticker, and it may be firing 90, 100 times a second, but each frame is still static. It's sitting there. So you've got a static frame, an event, runs the logic, goes and notifies that things have changed, which then triggers another event. Which triggers another rebuild. So that's the short version. AR in Flutter. I
just took a look because it's been a while. Like there's an AR kit plugin, there's an AR Flutter plugin, there's an AR core Flutter plugin. I mean, I don't think there's any best one. All they are libraries that are what's the word? Wrapping the native implementations. I don't actually know. Do you remember it wasn't too long ago that oh no, I think they were using Unity. It was Wallace and Gromit. There was a Wallace and Gromit game or something that was done with Flutter. Official title. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, you can also use Unity, I think, as a kind of like its own sort of AR kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think there's any one particular one that is best over the others. Okay. Not mine.
Self-assess, junior, middle, or senior. Well, if you understand animations, HTTP, JSON serialization, how to use context, how to use media query, and how to avoid unnecessary rebuilds when using state management systems, then I would say that's junior.
I do. Sorry, I was just thinking about this out loud. Sorry, it's just going over my head here. If I was thinking about my history, again, when I was junior, sort of mid-developer, senior, it was maybe more about how often am I looking things up? How often am I referring to things? Because it's about knowledge gain at some point as well. I mean, what I'm trying to say is you always go to, just give me let me make a clear point here. like just that ticker mode thing, right? Like I knew ticker mode was the thing, but I had to go to the API, I had to go to the docs to refer to the specifics, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of feel like it's not necessarily that, but what I'm trying to get is when you're dealing with sort of as a developer, not necessarily about Flutter, right? But as a developer, you're junior when you begin, because you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to be learning from your seniors, right? You're going to be learning from people above you. And
well, but like, there's a point when you're not even ready to be junior yet, too.
Oh yeah, I mean that's when you start programming. But let's say you've done a BSc, or you've done your some education on software development, right? You start as a junior role. You're getting taught by people above you. You're picking up how to do testing. You're picking up all these different things. And as you gain that knowledge, you're going up that tree, right?
That's intermediate is when you really start digging into testing. Now, you should have the basics of testing, even as junior. But this is why VGV doesn't hire anyone who's not intermediate or higher, because VGV has a religion about testing, which is a very good way to look at it. Now, one thing though about the documents, about the documentation, you are looking things up a lot, no matter what level, because there's someone somewhere who told me that if you have the IDE open in one window or in one monitor and you don't have the docs open in another, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. I wonder who that might be.
I mean, to be honest, it's one of the things, right? You can't, like, there's so much material there, you can't put it all in your head at once, right? So you're gonna have to always refer back to the documentation at some point, but it's about linking the concepts together. And I think, like, having that sorry, I'm just thinking about this again. It's like, I think it's about self-training. Like, you're training your brain to understand how computers work, how documentation is written, but also about how to build a mental model of software, right, and of concepts, because as you go up in scale, you find it easier to build that mental model and to know how things are referring to others and how things work, and that's only from experience.
Okay,
right. Let's get
one more real quick.
Couple, yeah.
This one actually is fairly easy, because what I'm thinking here is, if you, I understand, but if you're opening the PDF from a file explorer that's not Flutter, then you're talking about doing something before Flutter's even spun up.
No, I mean, how can I open a PDF file from File Explorer? But what do you mean from File Explorer?
Like, right. Are Windows you talking Explorer? About creating? Are you? Yeah, in which case it's all the platform. The Flutter app isn't even running yet. Like, however, what if they're making a File Explorer with Flutter?
I mean, it says here that he's tried to use Action View and Kotlin, and he's not good at Kotlin. Well, you don't need to be. So what you're looking for is this package. I'll bring it up in a banner as well. And it's actually originally as a first-party plugin, and it's only going to work on Android, right? But it was originally called Android Intent, and that's a plus plugin, so it's Android Intent Plus. And this allows you to fire those intents without using any Kotlin code, straight from Dart. Whether or not that helps you, that's another matter. You probably want the share plugin, to be honest. So when it comes to native stuff, what you're actually doing is saying share a PDF, and then the options is to open with a PDF viewer, right? Like that's normally the way the system works. So I would go look at the share plugin as well. But yeah, I think that's it for now. We'll carry on our questions.
I see a few of these questions also. It would be interesting to get another opinion of someone who actually knows Android, but I think we have someone who knows Android, maybe. And more importantly, he seems to know something about Flutter and open source. So who might that be? Hi, Matt.
Oh. Howdy.
Howdy, partner.
And good morning. Good morning.
I am a little bit shocked. There's not much yellow in this screen.
Oh, I see. I see the SuperDeclarative.
There you go. I'm a man of many hats, both literally and figuratively.
That is some cowboy hat you got there. I don't know what the proper name is for that. I've forgotten. There's a name for it.
It's cowboy hat.
Yeah, there you go. Cowboy hat.
I thought there was like
Is
a
it Stetson or?
Stetson or
It's some brand that I found on Amazon.
Okay, it's China. It's China brand.
Yeah, that's right. The Chinese cowboy hat.
There you go.
Well, how you two doing today?
Oh man, I'll tell you what. It's nice to get a break from updating tickets on the board. I've been doing that for a couple of days.
I have to say, it's also been nice. Like from previous weeks, we've been doing like the puzzle hack and all this other all the other kind of event stuff, and it's just nice to get back to just general chit chat, answering questions, having a good time. So nice to see you.
Go.
You too.
Yeah.
I know you two stay busy, but Scott, I guess if you're moving a lot of tickets, that must mean progress is being made, right?
Well, not only is progress being made, but between talking to the client and talking to Simon and trying to keep things moving quickly so that the client sees lots of progress, the board had not been updated in about 6 weeks.
So you pretended that 6 weeks happened overnight. Here's the problem. They're going to expect that same progress next week. So good job, Scott.
Yeah, I think I probably closed a little over 60 tickets in the past 24 hours.
All right, keep it up. 7 days from now, 60 more tickets.
So,
all right,
hey,
well,
what have you been doing?
Oh, geez, how much time do you have? I didn't put together a presentation for today because it is Humpday Q&A, so I wanted to leave it a bit open-ended.
That's where we roll.
I will say that yesterday we released version 020 of Super Editor, which I think YouTube probably both saw on Twitter, and all of my Twitter followers have seen that. But that's kind of the big news for me at the moment. Is there anything in particular that you two would like to talk about?
Well, I mean, the bounty hunter thing, right? Like, I mean, that's I feel like we should explain to the community what this is about. I mean, we started talking about that ages and ages ago.
Yeah. And one other thing really quick, Matt, your name does not comply with our standards here on the show, so I need to change that. There you go. Much better.
Thank you.
Now that's where you can go follow Matt.
Notice there is not an E in super.
Yeah.
Blame Twitter. Twitter said you do not get that many characters for your name.
We actually had that. So here's a little backstory for everyone. Flutter community, instead the Flutter community account used to be Flutter CMTRY or something like that. Or we lost the
wrong button.
We used to be like Flutter community, like written short with some letters missing, and just no one could find it. So it's Flutter COM, COMM, and we changed it, and suddenly it skyrocketed because people could find it. So yeah,
it'd be nice if Twitter would, I guess, index the full name so that when you type in the full name, you'd still find the short handle.
Oh, I see what you mean. So like maybe having like
in your description, your bio right beneath the handle, if you put full Flutter community.
Have some synonyms.
Well, I think it does something similar, because whenever I'm trying to find someone to at tag them, I just put in their real name and it comes up.
Yeah,
but I think that's only because I'm already following them.
But that's the point. But would you want your visible name to be, like, for example, SuperDeclarative to be super space declarative, or super with the R with the E missing? Because you kind of want it to be the brand, but also want some synonyms, so if people type the word super, they would still find it, right? I don't know. Off topic.
Yeah. Well, to your question, what is the Flutter Bounty Hunters? The Flutter Bounty Hunters is a remote development agency that is exclusively focused on building open source Flutter and Dart packages. So developers who are paid for their work at market rate, but they work exclusively on Flutter and Dart packages, and those packages are open source. And the idea behind this effort is that there are a lot of companies out there that need infrastructure tools. And what I mean here by infrastructure is that these are tools that are not related to the core competency of the business. So if you're talking about a business in banking, these are non-banking tools. If you're talking about an airline company, these are not related to reserving seats or flights or anything like that. These might be things like a new type of database. It might be a rich text editor, for example. There are lots of things that are needed across different industries, and therefore they're just a hurdle. They take a lot of time, investment, complexity, but they don't help you actually serve your users or customers any better, and they're not a competitive advantage. We would like to build those tools on behalf of those companies, which, one, obviously allows us to solve the problem for the entire ecosystem. But two, if multiple companies come to fund the same work, then the cost per company is actually reduced by a fraction. Because if your company implements, again, let's say a rich text editor, you're paying 100% of the price today and 100% of every feature you add and every bug that you fix. If 10 companies fund that same thing, you're paying 10% of what it would normally cost. You don't have to find and hire the people, and you don't have to keep them on payroll. So there are advantages to the companies. There are advantages to the developers on the Flutter Bounty Hunters, because we want to work on cool problems and we want to show off to all of our friends what we built. And then there's also the benefit to the entire Flutter community, because whatever we build, all of you get for free. It's just that you don't necessarily control which features are built. Those decisions are made by the people who are funding the project. But whatever we build, you get it for free. Does that make sense?
So it's a win-win-win.
What was that?
Absolutely. Three-way win.
Three-way win.
It kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me when I was working at that one contract, Simon, when we were like, I come in to Zoom and I'm like, you know what? I need a barcode reader, and I need it to be able to read any barcode, and I need it to return the data as a string, and I need to be able to drop it into any kind of UI. And nobody asked me what I'm doing with it. Okay. And we popped out a generic barcode reader with all these capabilities. It was pretty nice. And what did it take, Simon? 3 hours? If that.
I vaguely remember this.
It was myself, Simon, and Aikish. And it took us about 3 hours, and threw an MIT license on it, and away it went.
Oh, that was, we were trying to like hook up, wasn't it the community package and an ML kit or something? I can't remember what it was, but yeah. There's also like, there's several of those packages now, but yeah, there is that kind of like generic, you need something quite generic and build it as a library. But again, I suppose the other side of this coin is also about upkeep, right? You need someone you need a company, because there's so much that goes in the head of like a single developer, right? Like as a single developer, it's really hard to build. You want to build something. Let's say that barcode reader as an example. You publish it, and then it's really hard to then maintain that and do your day job and do other things, right?
Well, to be more specific, just to make sure we capture the right issue, it's not even that it's one developer. It's that developer isn't compensated for fixing the bugs or adding new features. If it's one developer, if that person is paid to do the work, then they have a revenue model. They can go do the work because they're paid for it. So whether it's 1, 2, or 3, or 10, or 100. But let's also recap what the most typical open source projects look like. I say it's a kind of bimodal distribution. On the one hand, you have the projects that are maintained by 1 or 2 or 3 developers as charity. So they just put in nights and weekends. Eventually they get tired of people yelling at them in the issue section. And they're like, I think my family would prefer that I go spend time with them instead of fixing bugs for people that are screaming at me. And then, of course, that's when the project dies or massively slows down, and everybody who's come to depend on it kind of gets screwed at that point. And this happens over and over again. And then the other major area of open source is when open source is either built into the marketing budget of a larger company, or it's built into the infrastructure budget of a larger company. And that's a fine model, but it comes with some drawbacks. On the marketing side, open source is used to recruit developers. It can also be used to recruit clients. But a company is only going to invest into those open source projects what seems to return that investment in terms of new clients and new developers. If they stop hiring or don't need people, if they fill out their client book, they handle all the clients they can deal with, there's not an incentive for them to keep putting money into those projects because they don't need the marketing value. With infrastructure, that's more useful because at least the company is using the tools they're publishing. But then the only tools the company is interested in building and maintaining are the tools that have significant internal value to that one company. So you're limited to what you can ask or expect them to do. So I'm saying let's create a middle ground here where we have the business model, we have the revenue to support the development, but we're willing to go solve any Flutter problem or any Dart problem as long as there are companies there to fund it. That's the middle ground that I want to see, that I'm trying to create with Flutter Bounty Hunters.
And you've got the outfit to boot.
Absolutely. I go all in.
So someone said to me the other day, what was, I can't remember, you were dressed in like camo on one of your videos, and they're like, what's going on here? They couldn't get it. I was like, no, it's bounty hunters. He's a bounty hunter. You get it?
Yeah. Over on the wall is a tactical vest, a camo tactical vest. It's easier to put the jacket on and off. I was thinking about wearing the tactical vest to the upcoming Palo Alto meetup, but I'm worried that I'm going to scare some people walking in there.
People might just think you're like one of those like you just like gun nuts. I don't know what I mean. You know what I mean? Like all for army or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or you know, they'll try to decide whether or not I'm a school shooter. I'm short enough to be a school shooter. I'm just a little too old. But yeah, so I probably won't wear the tactical vest, but I think I might wear this. I'll wear this to the meetup here in Palo Alto.
You can always take the hat off and like, have it hanging like behind you, right? Like because you got the neck thing.
I could, but then you got to look at my ugly balding head.
Just underneath have the yellow cap.
Yeah, Scott knows how it feels.
Oh yeah. I'm just shaking my head because I'm in a state where the gun nuts are trying to force through being able to carry concealed without any permit.
What?
So,
well, I'm a fan of the gun nuts, so I guess I'm wearing the right outfit.
Yeah.
I'm not. Let's not go there. We're staying on topic here.
Anyway, yeah, I'm from the
so,
military. You're supposed to qualify on that stuff. Anyway.
Oh no, just reach out to the chat and say if you have any questions, get them in. Put your queue in front of your question. This is for Matt or for us. And it'd be nice if it was related to what we're talking about, but also Flutter questions are also welcome in general. This is, after all, Flutter Q&A, Humpday Q&A. Yeah.
Student.
Oh, Steph.
I would call that a student, Steph. So,
should we see what we have on it? So we were answering questions, Matt, before you arrived, and we can obviously continue talking about various topics. But should we get through some more questions while we're here? Are you interested in answering some questions?
By the way, how many people roughly do we have in the audience right now?
About 50, I think. 50.
Right now, live is 50, which means we can probably expect about 1,400 on the views.
Yeah.
So
let's see. MA asked, is it suggested to separate the business logic from your views? However, some widgets are tight to particular implementation backend faster UI. How can we use such widgets sustainably? I mean, here's a good example, right? Let's say you're using I'll give you an example because you're a Firestore UI point. I would say, let's say you're using the Firestore list from Firestore UI and you're using this list of data all across your app. What you could do is encapsulate the Firestore list widget in your own list widget and then use that across the app. Now, what you've done there is you've maintained that you're only using Firestore in one place in your app then, right? The Firestore UI. That's one way of like
Firestore UI is capitalized. Is this an actual package or an actual widget?
There is a package which gives you kind of like a list view from a collection and some other sort of funky stuff. To be honest, I wouldn't use them personally.
In my apps where I've used Firestore, when I use any of the Fire-based tools, I immediately abstract the data that's coming back. So I'll set up the stream listeners, but like let's say, for example, it's for user authentication. I have a generic user session which understands whether the user is anonymous, authenticating, authenticated, or expired. You can do various things with that as you wish. Beneath the surface, it happens to talk to Firebase, but that is not known or exposed to anything outside of the user session.
Okay. Something you folks have to understand here. Just a moment. Sorry, Si. You're getting answers from people here who, well, like Simon, who writes his state into the app state all the way at the top of the tree and then just calls for ancestor state of type instead of using a state management package. And then Matt who, long before the Flutter skeleton app came out, using an animated builder in order to handle changes, I happened to see Matt doing that instead of using state management at times. So you're talking about, you're asking about this package and that package, and these guys write pure Flutter most of the time.
Well, you should also ask yourself, are you a Redux developer or a Flutter developer? Are you a block developer or a Flutter developer? Are you a GitX developer or a Flutter developer? If you fully understand Flutter and then you go choose to use one of those things, that's your business. But I don't, you two tell me what you see, but what I've seen historically is that a lot of the people who use those packages, they use them not because they chose them, but because they don't know how to do anything else.
They chose them because it was they felt it was easier or faster to learn them than to learn to do it in Flutter.
Well, meaning that they haven't learned how to do it in Flutter, which means if you took away that package, they literally wouldn't be able to do their job, which is, and again, that's not universal, but I've seen that pattern. I don't know if you two have seen that pattern.
Yeah, I've seen that pattern as well. It's kind of interesting, like, because you just mentioning that made me realize something that I do. Whenever I use a package, I investigate that package. I try to understand what it's doing. I like to, understand that concept and what it's doing for me and what it's actually, if I couldn't understand it, I probably wouldn't use it. Like what I'm using there is a shortcut to essentially, almost get rid of the boilerplate, right? Not having to write it myself, but I know how it works. I want to understand that, right? If I couldn't understand how something works, I wouldn't use it.
Yeah, there are multiple concepts there. One is one thing you're getting at is liability. If anything goes wrong with that package and you don't know how it works, if you couldn't actually sit down and build that package yourself, it means you're utterly dependent on that package. And if it disappears, well, your boss or your company, they might have some words for you. The second point is that if you go look for a solution and you don't consider multiple options, like if you can't find any other option, then you're not really making a choice at all. And if you're not making a choice, you're not engineering. You're programming, but you're not a software engineer at that point.
Now, one other thing real quick. Sorry. Honey, take Randall's admin permissions away, please.
So the actual point that that MA was asking here was how can we use such widgets sustainably? So if you had to use those widgets, if you had to use external widgets,
well, you have to define sustainably. Okay, so the thing about a widget that understands Firestore is that you're never going to be able to switch out Firestore. That's certainly not from that widget, but the more you proliferate those widgets, really your entire app would need a rebuild because you're going to make a bunch of structural decisions that expect Firestore to be there.
So I'll give an example. I agree completely. Sorry, I wasn't disagreeing. I completely agree with you. I was just going to say you can encapsulate that piece of UI into your own widget, right? And then you're using that widget everywhere. And as long as what you're passing in is not a collection or something specific to Firestore, more like an enum or something that is your own app logic, then you've abstracted away all the Firebase stuff. And that's what Matt here was saying at the very beginning, that you go use like Firestore, then you the first thing you do is you put it over here to one side, and then any data you're getting from that you're converting into your own models. You're migrating that into what you understand inside your app, so you're not sprinkling your entire app with that external library.
And there's two places you do that. So you mentioned models. So like one place you would do that is like you'll think of an example collection here. What's a good real example that we could use for a collection in Firestore so that we're not speaking so abstractly?
Books.
Okay, books. So you have this collection of JSON blobs, and each JSON blob in Firestore represents a book. It has your title, your author, your ISBN, etc. You're going to get that back as a snapshot or something like that. There's some Firestore name for what they're going to give you. Instead of ever giving access to the snapshot, instead define a data structure with a class called book, which has title, author, ISBN, etc., and share books around your app instead of snapshots. That's abstracting the information. And then Simon, you also mentioned wrapping the widget. So if you have a list that is meant entirely for Firestore, you can create your own little stateless widget around that includes the Firestore one, but the rest of the world doesn't know it. They just see your stateless widget, well, or stateful, it doesn't matter, but they see your widget, which allows you to change the inside of that widget at any time without necessarily impacting the rest of the app.
Okay. We are hitting the point. There's another podcast that I used to listen to called Writing Excuses, and they have this thing called Can of Worms.
Yeah,
And if they hit a point where it's getting ready to consume, well, hang on, I got another one here.
Go on.
I got one from Matt, and yeah, but if a question looks like it's going to consume the entire show, then they call it a can of worms and move on.
This is the can of worms?
No, the one you were on was can of worms.
Okay. So the question is, who can work for the Flutter Bounty Hunters and how do you join? Anyone is welcome to apply. The one thing I will say about the Flutter Bounty Hunters, like as opposed to this effort here, which is about education, I have a channel for education. Flutter Bounty Hunters is a job. We have real clients paying real money. We're expected to do real work and do it well and do it quickly. If you believe that you are an effective Flutter developer and you would simply prefer to spend some of your time working on open source instead of whatever else you would work on, you're more than welcome to apply. You can go to flutterbountyhunters.com and send me a message with a button in the lower right corner. The idea behind this team is that we will spin up efforts as work comes in. Work is going to be very sporadic. There will be projects that come in, we'll build them out for a V1, and then we'll linger for a while, and then the companies will come back and say, we want to sponsor a V2 and these kinds of things. So this isn't a full-time job or anything, but every so often I'll come along and say, hey, would you like to work on this? And if you say yes, then we'll figure out what your time commitment is. We have posted transparent rates for both clients and developers, and that'll be that. And then there will be certain practices that are expected. Those will be made available to you as write-ups on GitHub that explain what the expectations are for each of the Flutter Bounty Hunters, and we will work in that manner on those projects. Also, the other side of this, which is important, is finding companies that want to fund projects. I'm in the process of trying to normalize this idea of paying for open source because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a win-win-win when you do a kind of multi-company funding model. But that's going to take quite a bit of convincing. It's because it's not the norm. It's not what most companies are used to. So if you work for a company on a team or you know of a company that might benefit from this, help get the word out there, send them our way. The more funding companies we have, then the more Flutter Bounty Hunters we can bring on the team. And we are a remote agency as well. So you can be anywhere in the world pending possible tax policy. That's the only issue.
1099. Now, interesting thought there on getting companies to pitch in. Have you thought about doing anything like a GoFundMe for each individual package idea? Say if one company says they want X, then put it together with a GoFundMe, put the word out there, and then companies or individuals can chip in. And when the threshold to be able to pay for it looks like it's been reached, start.
Yeah. This was the original idea. So Simon and I talked about the concept of the Flutter Bounty Hunters a long time ago, and we talked about that kind of model. The reality is that's even more difficult to do. You're going to get individuals that want to come in and donate $15, and that, for a charity project, that again, that'll buy you a few coffees. In the world of Silicon Valley level developers, for example, that might charge, and depending on your level, you're talking about junior and senior earlier. So maybe a junior developer is at anywhere from 60 to 80 an hour. Maybe a senior is anywhere from 100 to 200 an hour, a specialist beyond that. It would take so many people to fund even the smallest effort that it really...
Right, but I was talking about actually companies contributing, not individuals.
So once it's companies, whatever that number is, whether it's 3, 5, or 10, the number is going to be so small that it's more effective to just talk to them directly and organize it. That's what I am organizing behind the scenes. It's just not in a web page where you log in and say how much money you're going to put in. And a company probably doesn't, because if we look at the tens of thousands of dollars that gets invested over a few months, companies probably don't want to put in a credit card into a website for tens of thousands of dollars. They expect some direct contact. So it's a good point. And I would like to eventually get to a place where we're so popular that we can do that. But the truth is, to get started, it's actually more effective to just go to each company, have the phone calls with them, and organize the effort that way.
I was going to say, the other side of this is it's not always, you can't just say this project is, say, 10 grand or whatever
Right.
it is.
No fixed bids, always
because
hourly.
because it's like because things change, right? Like the dependencies change, the requirements change, whatever changes, and then it's like, no, we need to finish this off. We need more. So and the sort of Kickstarter crowdfunding model is not arranged in that manner. That's more of a Patreon kind of thing, which is essentially paying every month to sustain some creator normally, right? The Patreon model, and although the Patreon model can work for developers, you'd be a patron of a developer doing whatever they want to do, right? This is about having a specific outcome.
Right. Okay. Before we get any further into this hole, we have another potential can of worms, but I have a way to short circuit that. It's called Timely.
What's this? How to write?
Go.
How can I write contract testing? Make sure the APIs I use are not changed. If changed, I can change it. Call the APIs, verify the result. So I mean, a lot of the time, this is more about like integration testing, right? Like you wouldn't want to call like HTTP requests in a normal unit test, right? You would fake all that, you'd mock it all, right?
Well, you don't even want to do it in an integration test. I mean, integration test you will, but the issue is that stuff is flaky. HTTP is networking is inherently flaky, so you're going to get all sorts of false negatives. Or
you can just imagine
whatever.
Yeah, just imagine like the web server goes down for your API, and all your tests start failing, and you can't figure out why. And you realize it's nothing to do with you; it's the remote, right? So there's plenty of reasons why stuff like that can break. But yeah, you were talking about contract stuff. I mean, the other thing you could do is, I know this sounds, I mean, it's an interesting one. I just came up with this, and that is things like if the website has a published, let's say they have a GitHub of releases, and they've released a new version, that you can have that as part of your build process to verify that version is there, and or that your API you're calling has a versioned API endpoint. I mean,
so the backend, if it's HTTP, can generate a Swagger file, which is a description of the inputs and outputs of each HTTP call. You can simultaneously have generate your HTTP code for Dart, and you can make sure that the Dart code, whatever you specify in Dart, matches the Swagger file. Now, I don't know why this is what you would want to do. I think maybe just, again, having a human phone call is a faster way to deal with these things in reality. But if you really want to match it up, you could use code generation on both sides to try to match it.
I mean, the thing is, he said verify the contract, right? And I just think about that and going, well, that's what a version number does, right? You're saying that the API should continue working for that version. If it breaks, then either the server-side team have done something wrong, or you've done something wrong on your side that doesn't match that version of the Swagger or the interface, as it were, right? So,
okay.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Go on.
Moving on.
Stop putting a timer on. Kick you. Right.
Google uses Dart Angular in their web apps and also Flutter, adding support to the web app. What will be the advantages and disadvantages?
Dart Angular is no longer supported. So there may be teams using it. There may be teams using it, but it is not scheduled for further versions or maintenance beyond whatever the internal teams might need for themselves.
Yeah, externally, right? So that it still can be used internally and still will be maintained internally for internal use, but available externally. To be honest, though, I got to say this: most people don't realize you can just use Dart. Like, forget about Angular Dart, right? Like, you can just use Dart with Dart HTML package and pop up div tags and use CSS and do all this fun stuff. Just because it's not supported as Dart Angular doesn't mean you can't use Dart for web purposes, right?
But would you want to? I mean, if you're going to mess with the DOM, so if you're going to assume responsibility over the DOM, the document object model, box layout, and the rest of traditional web,
obviously, I don't like web.
At that
I
point,
want to touch web, right?
Right. So at that, but if you're going to do that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I cannot stand JavaScript. It's just a terrible language. But if you're going to deal with DOM and box layout, why not just grab TypeScript and go all in? And I like how I'm the one being timed now. Like it's not even about the
the
question anymore.
subject
It's like,
is.
Matt, shut up. I don't want to touch the DOM. So all of my little personal marketing pages are now built with Flutter for web, which is not without issue, but it's a bigger issue for me to go deal with web tech or browser-based technologies. I'm just like, if my users get a different scrolling experience, they can deal with it. I'm not going to go mess with the DOM and box layout and JavaScript and CSS and HTML and Webpack and NPM and Node and all that stuff.
I know, right? I exactly the same. I feel like I wish there was a middle ground. I wish there was someone that had come out with like a simplified, like something between Dart and dealing with the DOM, right? Something that isn't, but it's not also Flutter Web, right?
You know what?
So,
This could also potentially be a question that could be expanded on next week, just like this one right here. Do you think Dart has the potential to become a server-side language? What do you mean potential?
it already is.
So it already is.
Well,
here's the thing, though. Sorry, Matt. We've got Kevin Moore coming next week to discuss the uses of Dart in the full stack, not just in Flutter. So
yeah, let's expand that story a little bit. So first of all, Kevin is going to talk about Shelf, which is a web server built with Dart. It's a very foundational tool. You just kind of hook up a stream and send whatever you want back out to the client. But also there used to be something called Aqueduct, which was a kind of, I think, a RESTful web server built with Dart that has been retired. However, recently there was an announcement for something called ServerPod. This was created by someone who I believe used to be on the Flutter team. It must have been before my time because I don't think I ever met him. This developer just did a podcast with Flying High with Flutter. That was live. I think the recorded version will be released in about a week. And I've also been trying to schedule a conversation with him to talk about ServerPod because, speaking of Dart on the server, when you go to one of my websites, like when you go to flutterbountyhunters.com, that website is being served from a container on GCP, Google Cloud Project, whatever that acronym stands for. I have Dart code using Shelf. I worked with Kevin a bit to work out some of the wrinkles, but I have Dart using Shelf serving up the Flutter experience from GCP. Unless you're a search robot. If you're a search robot, my same server recognizes that and sends you regular HTML for the search engine, which is something I need to publish a video about because people keep complaining about SEO. I'm like, SEO is not a Flutter problem. SEO is a server problem, and you can solve it on the server.
That's what's it called, pre-rendered HTML. What's it called? There's a name for that in SEO. Pre-rendered, is it?
When the UI gives it to you, it's considered whatever that term is. But my point is, like, because React, for example, can actually generate the HTML for you, right? So it does server-side rendering.
Yeah, server-side rendering.
But in my opinion, that's just an accident of history. Your React, your user experience, should not be creating an experience for a search engine robot. I think those are two different responsibilities.
I also meant to mention this is the official Docker Dart package, which allows you to do Dart from scratch, which is how you can easily do deployments on Cloud Run and so on. There's a good, if you literally just go look up Docker and Dart, you'll go find a bunch of articles made by various people, including people from the Dart and Flutter teams in Google. So,
all right. Best way to avoid build errors if the UI is continuously changing during touch events, like a drag. Widgets binding instance add post frame callback is not working.
It sounds like you are changing variables and you're not building your UI in response to those variables. Generally speaking, unless you're looking up some render object, you shouldn't need add post frame callback at all.
Yeah.
Inside your state object, you should have some variables that you are turning on and off or whatever as the user taps, drags, etc. And then in your build method, you need to see what are these variables and what am I supposed to build right now. Now, I'm going to guess that what you actually are doing is looking up the size and position of some object in a post frame callback, but I can't answer that question without knowing the specifics about what you're measuring and why.
Tell you something that I did this kind of, there's that thing that you do, right? When I first got Flutter, one of the first tasks I tried to do, which was to drag an icon around the screen, something I just quickly wanted to do. And I realized, so basically you do your gesture detector, you handle your events update your local state inside your stateful widget, that calls set state, and then you rebuild the UI and change the position of your widget based on that state, right? Now, if you try to get, and obviously to get to where I dragged, I would use the render objects and do local to global and whatever other things I need to do. If you try to do that during build, you're going to get a build error because those elements don't exist the first time round or some other sort of things. So you shouldn't need to add post frame callback in touch events ever. I can't see having to do that. You might, if you are looking up, I will correct myself there. If you're using provider or Riverpod and you're looking up those widgets in a touch event callback, you're doing it in the wrong place. You need to do it in build and then pass the result of that to those callbacks using like a closure or something. The other thing to do, seriously, Scott, stop it. Okay. The other thing to do in add post frame callback is there's also schedule microtask. So particularly, to be clear, there's a difference between the two, and I need to explain this because most people don't realize. Add post frame callback is call my callback once my frame finishes rendering, but there may not be a frame scheduled to be rendered, right? Let's say nothing changes, right? So you cannot be guaranteed that you might be waiting an arbitrary amount of time, right? Schedule microtask is about the next part of the main loop. Your task will be running, right? So this is after the current pass of build is done, so you can be guaranteed certain things, the state of the application, but it's not guaranteed on the next frame. So normally in a lot of those situations you want to schedule microtask, which is from the Dart async package. Just throw that out there.
So, alrighty. Okay, somebody's wondering about actually where to put some business logic. No Flutter code. I'm not sure what Flutter code means.
Someone has to define business logic. I know what I tend to mean with this, but I've seen so many developers where this is a term that means whatever they want it to mean. There are UI things they call business logic. And well, if you don't know where that line is, it's going to be real hard for you to decide what side of the line to put something on.
I know what he's
also with Riverpod, let's say you're changing something in a model in your logic. Okay, that's fine, but you're going to need to use a read.
So let me be clear. What this point here is about his first original question. I think this was before you came on, Matt. Was about the separation of business logic and widgets. I can't remember quite, but the point here is yes, you don't pass your business logic is normally like plain old Dart, right? So it has no idea about Flutter specifics. It doesn't know about provider. It doesn't know about the business build context or anything like that. But what you can do is really simple: is pass a method. Right. So when you construct let's say on the front end, it's a block, it's using a block or it's a class called whatever, it's a controller. Okay. But you want to get access to something from providers, you need context.read. What you do is you provide a function that your business logic can call to get that object. And that does a closure where it says context.read this. So what you've done is the logic for how you get that variable from your build context is still in your widget, but you've passed that function to your controller. So what you've done is you've done sort of separation of concerns. Your UI is still in your UI. How you get the object is still part of your UI, but the business logic is completely just plain old Dart and separate.
And let's also point out that what you just described is only a problem if you're using whatever Riverpod or whatever, because this is not something that I ever have to deal with. If something happens inside of a widget, either it's going to invoke a callback, or it's going to invoke something on a controller, which then moves execution outside the widget tree into those so-called business rules or business logic, where I do business stuff, and then something gets pushed back into the tree, which causes a rebuild.
It's like a state change does a future or stream, and then that causes the UI to rebuild and react.
Yeah, we could literally sit here and catalog each of the ways to get in and out of the widget tree. There are a whole bunch of them. They're all really obvious once you sit down and look at them. But this is what I'm talking about when I say that these state management things, they make things easier for about 10 minutes, and then they make things more complicated. Learn how to use the tools that you've got. Do you know how to send in callbacks? Do you know how to define your own concept of a controller? Do you know how to use Builder, Layout Builder, Stream Builder, Animated Builder? Do you know the tools that are already there?
Here's the thing, Matt. That would make actually for a fantastic tweet, because as someone who still remembers what it is to be a ranked beginner, the biggest problem that you have is not knowing what you don't know. It's hard to go out and learn the things you need because you don't know what you need.
I have a YouTube channel for Flutter Bounty Hunters now, and mostly that's going to be used for release announcements, but I'm also going to put videos there to help people become effective Flutter Bounty Hunters. And this is probably one of the first things I should address is the list of all of these tools and where to use them and how. Yeah. But also we have a social problem here, which is it's cool to be an outspoken fan of one of these packages and to worship it. And if you don't do that, then like us, you are an outcast. Like, look at me. I have to go live in the middle of the desert over here as a cowboy because I don't use any of these state management packages. We need to solve the social problem. It's like, I don't care if you make an engineering decision to use Riverpod or Flutterblock or whatever, but it should be an engineering decision. The Kool-Aid drinking is really a problem in this industry. And I think it's making things worse. And I think at some point,
it's the same reason. Sorry, so to be clear, it's the same reason why we keep getting the question: what is the best state management solution? Because there is no best, right? Best is that's the issue. Like,
and people don't even. There's not even a consistent definition for the term state management, which is why I rarely use it, and two, I say it doesn't mean anything. It's not a real term. It's made up because everybody means something different. Which I wrote a blog post years ago called "Understanding State Management and Why You Never Will," where I
remember that.
Still available on Medium if anybody wants to go read it. But I have this broader concern. I have a broader concern, which is thousands and thousands of projects are using these state management packages because the developers don't really know any better. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I think those projects are going to grind to a halt because it's so much, they're going to accumulate so much complexity. Like, if you're using these packages because you don't know how to not use them, I can almost guarantee that you have a terrible breakdown of responsibility in your app. You have a bunch of spaghetti code. Eventually, these thousands of projects are going to grind to a halt. And when they do that, it's going to happen at a similar time because the ecosystem adopted this stuff at the same time. So suddenly all these projects are going to go really slow. And then the CTOs, the technical directors, the engineering managers who don't know what's actually happening in the code, they're going to start comparing notes with their buddies around the industry. And everyone's going to be like, yeah, these Flutter projects, all of a sudden, they've all ground to a halt. And what is the blog post going to say after that? It's going to say, Flutter doesn't scale. Yeah. The same thing we've seen with React Native and other things like that. It's not going to be, blocks don't work or Redux doesn't work. It's not going to be, we hired too many junior developers. They're going to compare notes on the one thing they know, which is they bet on Flutter instead of native Android and iOS, because that has to be a director level decision many places. So they know about that decision. They don't know that the junior developers have been doing ineffective things for 2 years. And so I'm worried about that sudden sea of blog posts that says, we're going back to native because Flutter doesn't scale. Flutter scales just fine if you know how to use it.
Yep. All right. What do we think about Flutter Flow?
Isn't that that's the point and click Flutter thing, right?
I'm not a big fan of what you see is what you get, but at the same time, it could be good for a quick mock-up. It could be good for throwing together your facade. I think it'd be good for a designer.
If I remember rightly, it is actually pretty cool, but at the same time, it's like
it is.
What do we think? It's cool. There you go. I mean, like again, it's like it's not gonna have in there what you. I mean, this is the same thing as I'm trying to remember. Like, give an example here.
Dreamweaver.
Exactly right. Dreamweaver core.
And even we could probably the better the more honorable comparison would be Squarespace and things like that. So it's so like back in the day, Dreamweaver and those kinds of things were a massive failure because they couldn't live up to even the most basic expectations. However, today we have to admit that things like Squarespace and what's the one that begins with W? Do you know which one I'm thinking of?
And another one.
Whatever. There's a few of them. They actually do a good job in the niche where they are meant to be used. They're essentially marketing pages. And all marketing pages these days are just a column of sections with images and text. And they're very good at quickly assembling those. But the Squarespace is not a universal website design and creation tool. I think Flutterflow in its best version will be something similar. Who knows what they're in the middle of in terms of business development right now. But eventually when the dust settles, if they are a success, I think it'll be something like Squarespace, where it'll be like these types of apps you can build quickly and effectively with Flutterflow, and everything else you need a developer with a programming language.
I totally agree with that. I mean, the other side of that also is like things like Dreamweaver got hellishly complicated, right? They had to keep adding.
Yeah, because they wanted to do like Dreamweaver literally wanted to do everything. Squarespace is like, no, we're going to do this one thing which we can generalize because it's all about abstraction. Like the nature of WYSIWYG is abstraction to visual programming, and the thing is, if everything is possible, you've just reinvented a programming language, except with visuals. So yeah, that's going to be insanely Imagine having a knob and a switch for every artifact in Dart and Flutter APIs.
It just reminds me of those kind of like those utilities for like generating visual effects where they have like you have to like link up nodes and have like a 10 billion like switches and drag and sliders and everything.
Yeah,
for every
pure data,
possible...
max MSP, visual.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right?
audio program. That's actually really cool. Visual audio programming is pretty cool, but I don't want to do visual programming for a website. That's just too much.
Well, what's that? What's that? Is it Sketch? Is it called? No, that programming language is like puzzle pieces that kids use to learn programming.
Something like that.
You can just imagine like Flutter programming where you just piece it all together like, visually.
And for me with Flutterflow, my concern really is back end. You know, if you want to throw together a facade, take that code and then plug it into
the other side of this is I don't know enough about Flutterflow, so I'm not going to speak to it directly. But a lot of these things are you're using their system, their engine, if you will, which also probably means you don't get the code out of it. You can't just go then and start changing bits that you want. You're not going to. What I'm trying to say is like a lot of even the WYSIWYG ones. Like for a good example, Squarespace, right? They build your website, it outputs HTML, JavaScript, and CSS or whatever. Great, but you can't. It's generated by software, right? Like you can't really go in there and edit it and change it and manipulate it manually yourself, right? And a lot of that happens with this kind of stuff as well. It's kind of a known problem. Anyway,
okay, we are getting down to it on time.
Let's get over some final questions. Get your final questions in. Right.
Dart support. Will Dart support like concurrency, just like Java or high-end language?
It already does. It has from day one.
Yeah, but the concurrency model is, well, first of all, we have an event loop, which is the reason we can generally avoid concurrency, where Java does not have an event loop. But then the concurrency model, I think, in Dart is so comparatively complicated that most people haven't used it. I've never spawned up an isolate, to be honest with you.
I have, and it's very similar to sort of Golang's messaging in that sense, right? Like, but the thing is,
short version, look up isolates.
Yeah, hang on. The point here is the question says just like Java or any other high level language, like it doesn't have it, right? Like it's never had. It's always had it from day one. You can do all that. You can spin up isolates. You can do all your multi-threading. It's not a problem. The difference is the word concurrency is all about synchronization between threads, which is, should we say, a 1990s way of looking at multi-threading. Like it's very much like, or 2000s. I'm getting old now. But the point is, you don't want to deal with synchronization between threads. Like there's so many problems that you can get. So you probably want the new model that we see with Dart and Golang and others are messaging, right? Where you have separated memory, you don't have shared memory, and you sort of send messages back and forth, just like networking, just like everything like that. And it's a known model, and it can you kind of separate the problem of the producer consumer problem of communication.
Are there producer consumer primitives? Because the immediate and obvious issue with what you just described is I'm going to parse 10 megabytes of JSON into memory. I want to do that on a background isolate, but the whole point is to provide a data structure to the primary isolate.
Yeah, and that is necessarily the thing. Once you've passed into an object, you can send those objects over to the front end, but they do have to pass a type of serialization, right? I think
it'd be nice if there were primitives. It'd be nice if there was like some kind of primitive where you could just like hand over ownership, so it wouldn't be shared memory, but someone owns it.
Yeah, so they do that currently with raw byte lists, and the idea is that what you do is you use like the binary codec or whatever it is. I think it's been a while since I've looked at this. You can take all your entire data models that are pre-made into a binary form. They're passed over the channel. They're now owned by the other isolate, and then they're sort of expanded back up. But again, that's extra overhead.
Yeah. Alrighty. What are the changes that we can have password reminders to work with Flutter Web?
Actually, I had this work in the very early versions, but the way I did that was I had a form with inputs off screen, and then whenever they were injected in, whenever those would was it like on text changed or whatever, it would update the text in Flutter. There was some weird funky thing.
Doesn't Flutter already use hidden inputs for forms on web?
Yeah. It only works if you're using the non-canvas kit, if you're using the HTML renderer, I think. It won't. So you should get the form save events on those, but couldn't tell you after more than that right now.
Safe and good networking. I'm tempted to say Dart HTTP. Dart HTTP.
Hey, but it's safe and good networking package other than Dio. But safe and good. I mean, they're all safe. I mean, unsafe. How are they? I don't know. Good?
I just use the HTTP package.
Yeah. I was gonna say. So
we should have a generated code solution there, and if we do, I should use it. But
there is a couple. So you've got so first of all, let me just be clear. You've got Dart HTTP, which is the raw HTTP networking stuff. Then you have the HTTP package, which is it's called HTTP on Pub, and that implements that and simplifies some of the interface so it works on web and desktop and various other things. There's a retrofit. You remember retrofit for Android? Yeah, there's a retrofit. Yeah.
The only way I ever got network working on Android was, in fact, my entire job was just to throw Jake Wharton libraries into the Android app.
Actually, I was going to mention. No, I'm not joking. That's literally what it was with Square. Was it Square? Right.
The credit card people, yeah.
Yeah, but I was going to say what they pioneered at that time. The reason why it became popular is they did open source libraries that they used in their projects, right? Their app, but they open sourced those modules, and then suddenly the entire industry is now using them. They become almost a standard, and in fact, HTTP is now part of Android, right? So this is what we're saying with the bounty hunters, in the sense that there's you can do stuff in open source, and it can be beneficial to a company, to its reputation, to all sorts of things. They can use the code themselves, but the entire community can gain from that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Now, I have a couple coming up, and I can tell you after working with both you guys, this next one is probably really for Matt because it's about testing.
Is Makito is good? I don't like to generate big mock APIs. Do you recommend any other Mocktail if you don't want code generation?
Yeah.
So Makito, I think, is all I've used, and most of my usage was before it did code gen, I think, or at least or Dart null safety, I think had a big impact on how to use Makito.
And you start getting code generation, and to be honest, it drives me nuts. In literally the past 6 months, I've been using Makito, and I'm transitioning some code that I'm working on to Mocktail.
So what does Mocktail do differently?
It uses no such method. It sort of reverts back to the way things worked before, kind of, but with a null safe way.
Yeah, I'll give that a try.
It basically it's the same thing you do when, and you're registering your callbacks, and then you're mocking your objects that way. It's the same thing. Like you do my mock, I don't know, let's say app, implements app, and then extends mock, implements app, and then it implements the interface. There's no such method to handle the when callbacks. But yeah, Mocktail. It's made by Felix and VGV. I think VGV have been
Felix
involved.
is a busy guy.
But I'm pretty sure Mocktail was Felix's project. Hopefully I haven't just credited the wrong person. Yeah, it's Felix's it's a Felix personal project. Sorry, Felix, if you're watching. Thanks.
And this person asked about big APIs. Generally, I wouldn't expect to mock big APIs. So mocking is something you do more as you write lower level tests. So for me, when I talk about unit tests, what I mean is the test of a single method on a single object. And in a unit test, I may very well use mocks for inputs either into the object constructor or the method, depending on the situation. But if I'm testing how 3 objects work together, I need real objects for those 3. So I'm not mocking a bunch of stuff. So if you are mocking large interfaces, 1, why is your interface large to begin with? And 2, why is that the test where you're using mocks?
You're testing your mocks at that point, right? Like there's a point at which you want to mock your inputs. You want to mock your inputs to your system, and then you're testing your output, right? Like you're not mocking your system, because then what are you testing? You're not, right? That's
okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
moving on. This one really is for Matt now. Okay. Could you please share the link? And I'm assuming you mean Flutter Bounty Hunters. Wants to get in touch, have an idea to attract.
It's really easy to type in. It's just flutterbountyhunters.com.
Notice he did not send you to let me Google that for you.
And I'm also not going to send the link. If you want to work, then you need to at least be able to enter that link. That can be the beginning of a litmus test.
I was literally just going to bring it up on. Do you want me to bring it up on the screen?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Just in case people can't spell. That's it. There is that.
Well, that's, to be honest, that's a problem too, because there's an expectation that you're writing very good documentation in English, which I don't mean anything by that. I know a lot of people are international and English is not their first language, but we are a company that's going to work in English and our documentation is going to be in English. You have to be able to speak and write fluent English.
Okay, moving on. For the longest time, people were saying, why doesn't Flutter use Kotlin constantly? And we finally got them to understand it's not going to work. But now, Kotlin Multi-Platform. Nope, still not going to work, guys.
Well, it depends what you mean by not going to work. Here's my concern. Here's my concern about Kotlin multi-platform. So this is a movement of irrational people who just refuse to give up the Kotlin language because they're so attached to it. And normally that's fine, because you can have like little cults around the industry that do their thing. But Flutter in recent history has been moving more to calling itself an application framework. Mm-hmm. The problem there is both the focus on applications and the focus on framework is going to position a bunch of priorities that are not relevant for a UI toolkit. Applications involve a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with the UI.
Yep.
If the Flutter team goes off and spreads themselves even more thinly, working on things related to apps but are not related to user interfaces, it's going to create an opening for something like Kotlin Multi-Platform. Despite being a cult, they're going to be able to burst in and say, oh, look at the things we have now that Flutter still doesn't have. And if that happens, I think it'll be the result of Flutter misprioritizing, because Flutter's had a 5-year head start. Flutter's had a 5-year head start, and they have paid developers with an organized team. If they fall behind, it will be the result of how they prioritize work, not a result of how amazing Kotlin Multi-Platform becomes. And some people say that competition is good. Competition can be good. It's not inherently good. If Kotlin Multi-Platform becomes popular, and let's just pretend that it supersedes Flutter, what that means is a bunch of us need to go move over to Kotlin Multi-Platform. What's the switching cost of that? How much does it take to relearn everything? What are we giving up? Really, the best thing is for Flutter to keep pushing itself to be the best version of itself into the future and to remain the primary option. So I'm not going to pretend that Kotlin Multi-Platform can't overtake Flutter. It can if Flutter makes the right mistakes. And I sure hope someone on the Flutter team or in the Flutter org is keeping an eye on this to make sure that doesn't happen, because we're going to pay a massive cost if we have to move over to Kotlin Multi-Platform.
Well, and the other question too is how many platforms is Kotlin Multi-Platform releasing to?
We'll just give it another 6 months, and that answer will change. Like Flutter used to be 2 platforms, so let's not pretend that what happens at the moment it limits the future.
What's interesting, what you just described there, Matt, is what I'd say has happened to Android, right? To a certain degree, right? In terms of the reason why Flutter picked up as being popular from my perspective,
100%,
is because Android just lost the ball and they're implementing all this stuff. And when suddenly Flutter comes on, it does things better and it does things faster and whatever. It was more what the development audience want. And
Android
so therefore it's gained. And that same problem is people are now concerned about moving from Android to, or from iOS or from whatever platform they want to Flutter, and the cost in doing that. So yeah, we don't want that to happen again, right?
Android has shown what happens when you try to solve every application problem. Like the kind of developer that's going to figure out how to encode audio, that is not the developer you want designing APIs for your view hierarchy. These are very different problems. You need different people using it. You need to have different understanding. What Flutter has shown is that when you sit down and you solve nothing but user interfaces, you can do a really amazing job of that. And it's way better than what the Android team put together when they were spread across every possible application responsibility. But if Flutter repeats that, if Flutter says, oh, well, now we're going to be an application framework, they're going to end up in the same place as Android, except they don't have a captive audience.
It's interesting you mentioned this, because just thinking about what you just said, it kind of, it made me think about something I remember speaking to someone about in the past, and that was about the way that before mobile, before Android and before iOS, the operating system was the operating system, right? If you wanted, let's say, something on top, you had a library, there was a framework package that you brought into to use inside your app. Otherwise, you coded everything inside your app, right? Now, what's happened because of the mobile device form factor, you now have GPS, you have all sorts of other services that are provided by the operating system that you wouldn't get on the standard desktop approach, obviously. They provided that and everything else on top. So rather than sort of surfacing up just those unique API spaces, you kind of getting into the role of framework. They're providing the framework as well as services, right? So, see what I'm saying there? So
yeah, and a framework also constrains what you do by definition.
Yeah.
Framework says like it's paint by number instead of actually engineering your own application. This is why a lot of Android developers, all they know how to do is connect activities to view hierarchies, to services, to content providers, and they don't know how to engineer applications.
And this is exactly this kind of just falls back to what we're saying about the using provider or using one of these things. You're learning to use provider, you're not learning to use Flutter, and what you or the frame or the language itself. So yeah, you want to know that as well as the specific libraries and frameworks and technology you
guys,
use.
We're 5 minutes over time and still have 4 questions.
Cool then.
All right, rapid fire.
Come on, rapid fire.
If you had a splash screen in Flutter Web and Open Web in a mobile browser, the splash screen will be small initially, but after 1 to 2 seconds, it will become bigger to adapt to the screen. It does.
I didn't even know Flutter Web had a splash screen, so I can't help you there.
I think they might be using the splash screen package. There's a Flutter splash screen package, and that's specific to that package. Can't help you. However, if you don't want to use that package, you're just using raw HTML. Used in your HTML and CSS, you're editing that to show an image in the background of your body tag. That's your splash screen. And then when Flutter renders, it won't stretch out, it won't change.
Right. Okay. Material Design Team announced that they are in partnership with Figma to build a plugin to export Figma to Flutter code. That would be cool. Do we think in the coming programming will be more about... Oh, okay. Do we think it will be more about writing back-end logic, I suppose, and then just grabbing Figma? It'd make my life easier.
I think there's a use. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be, like we said earlier, there's a use case for things like, I think someone else said Wix was the W that you were thinking of.
That's probably right.
Squarespace and Wix, they have their uses. and they will find uses for these kind of things, but they're not gonna give you the entirety. You're always gonna have to have an engineer in the mix, right?
The one small advantage I see
like
here might be for Goldens. It might make your life easier for Goldens.
Anyway, the Figma to build plugin to export Figma designed into Flutter code. I mean, there's currently ones out there that do that, and there's in fact Adobe XD also does that, right? Like it doesn't stop you from having to sort of go in there and hook things up or make things work. You can.
Yeah.
Sounds like the same question as before about isolates, right? Or is it referring to like on Android or something?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can still do it on Android. So you start up a background. There's Dart environment, I think it's called in the native package. I will actually just direct people to.
Well, the thing about Android specifically is that you need to run it within a service. And I made this possible when I was on the Flutter team. I rewrote the majority of the Android embedding for Flutter. And you can create multiple instances of what I'm calling the Flutter engine.
Yeah.
Inside the Flutter engine object in the Java code is calling whatever the appropriate Dart execution is. But again, the thing about Android is that you can't just do that from your activity. It needs to run in a service. Otherwise, when your activity disappears, you're not going to get background execution because you've lost the operating system focus.
It's something that a lot of Flutter developers have forgotten about, which is lifecycle.
Yeah. If you're curious about any of this stuff, for example, there's Java doc and there's also Objective-C doc. And these are the official documentations for the native platform components. The ones that Matt worked on, for example. And in there, you'll find the Dart executor, which is just the Dart side. You've got Flutter engine as well, where you get an executor from or vice versa. So, it's all in there. And you can just start up if, for example, in the Android case, you start up a background service and in your on start, you can spin up a Dart executor and run a Dart function from any background stuff. You don't have to have a UI. In fact, that's how Flutter, was it Firebase messaging? And there's another, what's the other one? There's a one for scheduled tasks or something in...
scheduled microtasks?
No. Anyway, there's another standard Android thing.
Sorry. Android.
Right. That's going to really bug
me.
You'll
think of it right after we stop the broadcast.
I know, right? I know. It's like going into a shop and walking out without the thing that you wanted. Go on.
Yeah. Okay. How to secure network requests between your app and MySQL using PHP right now. Now I'm looking at this though, and would like only users from the app to be able to request stuff from the database. Isn't that what auth is all about?
I'm getting tingling all over. This is not the way to do this. I mean,
now's your chance to explain it.
I'm feeling dirty.
Hang on. Firestore, Firebase auth, problem solved.
No. The point here is if you allow people to connect directly to so it's perfectly reasonable to allow people to connect directly to the MySQL database, right? But what you've just done is you've given access to the entirety, essentially, of your MySQL database server to the public, right? Now, you have to lock that shit down. Pardon my French. You have to really lock that down, and you have to make sure your permissions are set up right. And it's easy for someone to make a mistake and to allow, like, overwriting a table or changing a row of data or something like that. That's why APIs exist. APIs give you an interface to whatever backend system you want. If you want to migrate your app away from MySQL, you're not redeploying your apps. You don't have to have compatibility with MySQL in some fashion, anything like that. The API gives you a defined interface, a surface to deal with. Can you bring that question back up just for a second?
I have to find it again. Give me a moment.
The question may also be might actually mean API access rather than database access.
Well,
like a different website calling the RESTful API and causing, the question might be, how do I prevent someone that isn't me from calling my web API? That might be another version of this question.
At MySQL database, at the moment, I use PHP, but I would like to only users with the app to be able to request stuff. Well, that's an API key, right? You ship you can also do other things. Like I'll give you a really good example of this. Most people don't realize before protocols, you invented your own, right? Like before, like some standard, you just send some data, like you do whatever you want. So just to be clear, you can do things like encrypt the data. You could ship a private key in your app, and every bit of communication you encrypt. I mean, that's SSL, but you can do that. That stops people from listening in on the traffic. But again, when you talk about like only certain users of your app, well, then you make a login function and it returns a token, and then you make your request for that token. And if the token's not valid for that access, you deny that request. That's the standard authenticated APIs. You can go, there's a ton of information online about how to build those. Anything to add? Sorry, Matt.
Nope, I'm an idiot when it comes to security, so I defer to you.
The other thing is about Flutter and Fuchsia.
Try not to implement your own security. Use something that someone else has built.
Yeah.
Don't.
That's when you do reach for a package.
No.
Reach for something made by experts.
Unless you know,
and you will be
doing.
dependent on that package, but
yeah.
Sometimes you are just dependent on a package.
Yeah.
For example, the thing I was mentioned about time, calendars changing over different times of the year. You don't make your own calendar parsing library that has, after this date, the date changed from this to that. No, you rely on a package that's already done all that hard work. Like, for example, in Android, it was Joda time, I think it was, if I remember rightly. It was like the package just dealt with anything to do with time. You include that package, it did it all for you. You didn't have to think
Of course, someone did have to write that package, which could be something that the Flutter Bounty Hunters do in this industry.
I'm gonna say, okay, you have to tip your hat to that. I mean, that's like, thanks very much, guys, for building that package for me. It literally is that kind of, you do not want that headache. Same as like time zones and various other concepts. Just leave them alone.
News about Flutter and Fuchsia. I have not heard anything.
What's it? Like Google 9 to 5 have Fuchsia Fridays, don't they, or something on their news?
Yeah, they used to. They should still. Fuchsia is, as far as I know, still very viable, still out there. What has happened? Fuchsia has not slowed down. What has happened is the talk about Fuchsia appears to have slowed down. And I think that happened right after the U.S. Supreme Court case basically told Oracle to knock it off. Because it looked for a time, at least I thought, and a lot of people thought, that Fuchsia would be a big part of the solution for Google divorcing Oracle.
I have to say,
but it's not needed anymore.
It's funny people say this. Like, the actual Android operating system from day one doesn't use Android, doesn't use Java, right? Not in that sense. It's always built like your apps don't ship Java code. You write your apps in Java code, now you write them in Kotlin primarily, right?
Well, you're talking about the bytecode, right? You're talking about the Dalvik VM.
Yeah, it's always shipped with a Dalvik VM. It's never shipped with a Java virtual machine. It's a Dalvik virtual machine, right? So the whole idea that if you want to boil it down to the sort of nitty gritty of this, there's no need for them to step away from it in that sense, right?
Well, that case was about whether or not replicating APIs qualifies as replicating intellectual property. I don't know what the decision was there, but I'll say I've
Oracle
never heard
got
anyone
tossed out of court.
I've never heard anyone suggest that Fuchsia is related to that, though.
Remember, there was a court case over whether it dropped down to I remember. I don't want to go into this now, but I do remember
it basically came down to the implementation of a list API or something like that with a list. It was ridiculous.
What really bugged me about it, though, is like the lawyers deleted all the comments, they changed all the variable names to be the same, they got rid of all the white space and made it all the same, and then it was exactly the same code. And we're like, well, you just edited the fucking code, pardon my French. I mean, like, yes, you're going to make it the same. You've literally just made it the same. But the functionality, the way you approach like looping over some data is looping over the data. Right, they're going to be the same. And
there are only so many ways to do a bit shift left.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, in fact, I think here in the UK you can't copyright software, if I remember rightly, because you're copying like a list of instructions. The same you can't copyright a recipe, because like it's the step might be unique, but the series of steps is not unique or something like that. I can't remember what the thing is behind it. But
alrighty.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
This one,
Oh, should I move it into the other widget, or can I use a builder instead?
I
That's
rebuild.
too-
I rebuild entire subtrees all the time. This is another point of unnecessary fixation in most cases. You don't need to always achieve the absolute tiniest rebuild. If you run into a performance problem, go find it and solve it. But you don't need to go around putting builders everywhere.
I also builders can also do the opposite for you, right? Like you can end up like causing more problems.
Well, layout builder is actually not cheap.
I will mention though that you just said a widget that only has 2 text widgets, and one of them is changing. The one thing I'd mention about that is make sure both have keys, local keys.
Yes.
Because if you hide one, the text might jump into the other field by mistake, and you'd be scratching your head on working out why this thing's not working. But yeah, make sure both your text widgets, if they're siblings,
two text widgets is not going to hurt anything. Now, if you were changing, I don't know, 500 different cubes on your screen all at once, then I'd be a lot more worried about it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're changing 500 different cubes, then you have to change all 500 different cubes. So even that situation.
But you don't want each cube in a layout builder at that point, or you're really going to choke.
You find other mechanisms to optimize, but you find the problem and then you solve the performance problem, right? Like
identify whether or not you even have a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, moving on. Are we moving on?
Hang on. I've got to bring this up. Matt, you want to wake up every Wednesday early?
Yeah, I'm like this. That's why I'm sipping this the whole time, trying to.
So what you want me to sit here going?
All right, no more guests for you guys.
Washington and the Equalizer.
No more guests. It's just me.
You're happy.
In related news, the show is now moving back about 4 hours.
Yeah. Hey, here's an interesting one that didn't. Our flag guy, Randall had to go, but here's an interesting one: static metaprogramming.
I'm of two minds about this. Static metaprogramming is an interesting tool, might solve some interesting problems. Here's my concern. Anything you ever introduce into the programming language has to be fully understood up to and including the developer that just graduated from college and joined your team. And even though static metaprogramming belongs in a very narrow set of problems, developers, once again, drinking Kool-Aid, will spread metaprogramming across every code base that they can possibly spread it across. Like, it's like, what's that?
Grate the Parmesan. Get it spread around.
Yeah, this is some Parmesan cheese everywhere. What's the rule that says anything that can go wrong will go wrong?
That's Murphy's Law. And then part 2 is if there are multiple things that can go wrong, they will go wrong in the worst possible sequence.
Sure. So there's some version of that we should use that says, if a programmer can do it, a programmer will do it. This happened with RX on Android. I mentioned this on Twitter the other day, where I had team members, like, Android has buttons with callbacks like any other reasonable button, because you tap it and it does something. And all the entire Android industry decided for a couple years that actually the cool thing to do is to get rid of that simple callback and replace it with a reactive stream that connects to other streams that connects to other streams. And then all of a sudden, junior developers literally couldn't even add a button to the app because it was grotesquely complicated for no reason. So my concern is that static metaprogramming will do something similar where, yes, it has its use cases and it could be very valuable, but all these companies are just going to start throwing it everywhere, and you're going to just slow everything down, and every developer is going to have to understand these advanced tools. So that's my 2 thoughts.
Yeah, I agree totally. Like everything you just said, I just going to say you took me back there to when I remember when that happened, and I remember learning all about RX and streams, and like it was that every button end up building up a stream of a pipeline of things that debounce this and do that and everything else. And it's like
I had completely forgot the word debounce exists.
Because so many users are triple tapping a button in a fraction of a second. So you got to solve that problem, right?
Well, there was that kind of problem because your UI would lock up on Android because you do all that code inside your button handler, right? Like it just
so one problem creating another problem. Go solve the real problem. Move your work to a background thread. But this is, it's also, it was not indoctrination. It was an indictment of the idea that there were any technical leads in the entire Android industry. Because where were all the technical leads who were sitting there watching these PRs come in thinking, yeah, this is a good idea. This is in the interest of the company.
No, do you know what happened? Those technical leads were leading it. They were like, oh, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Mine was leading it. Because instead, like, being a technical lead isn't about making tough decisions. It's about doing cool stuff because you've earned the level of technical lead. So now you get to decide what happens in the project, which means the latest library, it's going in there, even if it makes everything worse.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Just a general statement. Please help me is not a question. I'm trying to learn Flutter. Please help me is not a question.
That is grammatically accurate.
It's a bit, well,
don't get me wrong, folks. We get these. I get these on LinkedIn. I am doing a Flutter project. Please help me.
Sorry. Do you know what the other one is? Even worse is when you get a question saying, "Can I ask you a question?"
I don't think that anyway.
No, only one. Only one, and you've used it up.
Can I ask you a question about Flutter and React, or Flutter and streams, or something like this? And you're like, just ask the question, and if you get an answer, then I don't mind because I've answered it, right? Like.
Well, people can ask me questions for $150 an hour. It's available at consulting.superdeclarative.com.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question for you. It's like, just ask your question.
All right. So a quick clarification here. I was simply pointing out that it's very easy to handle authentication by going that route. That's all.
But yes, there are times for relational databases. And if that's the use case you have, it's fine for you to use it. And although you can still use Firebase authentication with separate databases and separate servers, in fact, it's just a matter of coordinating the tokens.
You can actually, I was going to say, you can completely protect your PHP. You were using PHP. I wouldn't say I would use PHP, but your PHP API that you were sort of building in front of MySQL, you can totally use like Firebase auth, right? And then that would just launch you straight to your app and works with your app and everything.
Okay. Let's see here. One other one.
To be honest,
what?
I do want to mention that. Sorry if we didn't get to see all your things or your questions. We love the conversation that's happening, and yeah.
What is? I'm clicking on something. There it is. I don't ever remember Simon saying
Simon,
that.
You're using blocks and providers?
Yeah.
I've used
using
both.
provider to implement block?
So I assume what this person means is the block concept as opposed to the Flutter block package.
Yeah.
So the block, by the way, maybe, I don't know how many people actually know the history of blocks.
We explain this every week, but carry on. Right ahead.
Okay. Well,
no, please.
30-second history then. So a lot of people think that the concept of business logic components, blocks for short, came from the Flutter team. They did not come from the Flutter team. They came from the AdWords app. The AdWords app had a Flutter mobile app and a Dart Angular web app, and they wanted to share their immense set of business rules because the AdWords app moves huge amounts of data in real time through a bunch of filters and transforms. And they didn't want to implement that twice, and they had two solutions using Dart. So what do? They came up with the idea of business logic components. That team then went to a conference in South America, and they spoke about business logic components at whatever that conference was. And at the same time this was happening, a bunch of people were generically asking the Flutter team, what are we supposed to use for state management? And then the Flutter team got bombarded with this question so many times that they said, okay, we're going to go find just one example of so-called state management, and we're going to talk about it at Google I/O. So I believe it was in 2018, Philip got on stage at Google I/O and introduced this concept of business logic components to the Flutter community. At this point in time, everybody decided that blocks were the only way that you're allowed to build Flutter apps and that it came from the Flutter team. Both of those things are categorically false. And then the mind virus spread through the entire community.
Mind virus.
Now, blocks are a concept. Business logic components are a concept. There are certain statements about what to do and where to do it. The Flutter block package is one particular implementation inspired by that idea. And therefore, technically, it is possible to implement blocks with provider as part of that implementation. Although technically, what blocks do has nothing to do with what provider does. And what this probably means is, how do I get blocks into my widget tree? And one of the answers to that question is, you could use provider if you so choose.
Then again, you could just use inherited widget, like us powerful people.
Or constructor injection, or static singletons, whatever you want.
Yeah, I muted you, Scott, because we could hear the dog coming over the microphone.
Oh, yeah. No, she's in a downstay now. Yeah, it's like if somebody came out with a package called MVVM. How do I implement MVVM? Well, what are you talking about? There was a question about an internship with Flutter Bounty Hunters, but please, if you remember, Matt did say they need people who are experienced developers on this. It's not somewhere people are going to be learning.
Correct. We need people that are ready to go. This is the Flutter. So again, if you want to learn, go to SuperDeclarative on YouTube and watch my videos there. If you are an effective Flutter developer and you would like to professionally contribute to open source, Flutter Bounty Hunters is an option for you.
Flutter Hackathon in Kazakhstan with us as hosts. FERT, cheapest country in the world. Love it. The first thing I would do actually is I would reach out to Nilay Yenner on Twitter. She is organizing the social groups for Flutter all over the world. That's one of the things that they have dropped on her as a responsibility, shall we say. And yeah, she's working very hard on that. And reach out to us, let us know. We'll try and schedule something if you like. We can go from there. So, but yeah, Nilay is all day, every day working on things like Flutter festivals, Flutter meetups, so all kinds of stuff like that. And, oh, look, number one, if you go back to the very beginning of the stream there, all you got to do is drag the little button. You'll find the answer to that question.
Literally the first question we answered, I think.
Yep, I think it was. And there was one more really quick I wanted to throw up here. Yeah, there's one from Matt real quick while I'm looking for the other. So is 1 day a week enough?
1 day a week, maybe. It depends on how effective you are at your job, and it depends on how many other developers we have on that project. Obviously, that's not enough availability to build a project, but if there are 5 developers working and 1 day a week is useful, it's possible, but it depends on the details.
Okay, and we wanted an advanced episode for GoRouter. Go back about, 3 weeks?
You could go on the YouTube history, you'll find one with Chris Sells. Yeah.
It was like 3 weeks ago. Chris Sells, the gentleman who wrote GoRouter, he came on himself and was here for a whole episode.
And he's no longer with the Flutter team. He's moved on to bigger and better, greener fields. So
moved on to different things. Yeah.
And
where did he go?
GoRouter.
Has he said where he went?
I don't think he said. But
okay.
The actual GoRouter package, as far as I understand it, if I remember rightly, has been handed over to the Flutter team to ownership, stewardship over. I think, if I remember rightly, I can't remember if he's still maintaining it or not.
Interesting one. To tell whether read or not, visibility detector on, I guess, on an individual list item.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, here's the question: if I looked at a message, is that enough to know that I've read it? Your definition of read is what's important here, because a lot of people, they might have to have it open for a period of time. They might have to click on it. Your choice. If you want to use if you want to use visibility detector, that's a great option. But again, you scroll it on screen, it tells you it's visible, but it doesn't mean the user's read it, right?
But one of the things you have to watch out for here in an actual real world use case, I have a friend that I am talking to all the time on Signal, back and forth, sometimes many times a day. And the thing is that she reads her Signal messages in the little notification pop-up. And she's one of those people that if there is not a reason she needs to reply, then she doesn't, which means she sees my message, she reads it, she puts the phone down. But she's never actually opened Signal to read it. So in that case, your visibility detector would backfire because the person has read it, but the visibility detector was never actually rendered.
All right, guys, I've got to go prepare for my next meeting of the day.
Yeah,
But
we've got
I appreciate you having me on. Let's do it again.
A bit of time, yeah.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Yep.
Yeah.
Take it easy. I'm going to handle one more real quick.
All right. See you.
Before we take off out of here. I hate it when this chat moves just as I try to click. Single child scroll view. Why does it exist? The very simple answer to that one is if you have something too big for the screen. If you have a column that is a limited number of items in the column and it's not something where you need a list builder, stick it in a single child scroll view. If you have an image too big for the screen, but maybe you have something like a campus map.
It's to scroll a single child.
Yeah, just to scroll down.
If you have something, the key is if you have something large on screen, you want to scroll it, then you put it in single child scroll view. However,
and it's not infinite.
And it's not infinite. It has a finite data set of a realistic size. I mean, normally you only want to scroll something like, let's say I've got a form of fields, and it's fine if that form has got 20 fields in it, and I can only display 8 on the screen at once or something. Then a reasonable case is to use a single child scroll view, right? You're not going to break the bank in terms of performance. However, if I had an open set of, say, infinite fields in terms of 100 fields, 1,000 fields, or multiple pages, and all sorts of other things, then I'm going to use a list view builder because I can't know up front that there's a finite amount of memory that's going to be used, and it wouldn't just openly crash or cause other problems and performance problems and jank. So it's about choosing the right thing. Anyway, I think we're at time here to
there's just one other thing though. Questions like this really don't work too well. I'm not trying to be bad to anybody. I'm trying to show the idea of the difference between a Flutter question and a please help me with my specific app question, which this is not for. But we got Flutter crashing on Play Store version and doesn't say anything else. There's no way in the world anybody could figure that out.
Try sending it as one question.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Send it as one question. But the other thing too is this is asking for specific help with a specific app. And
I mean, that is your
that's
job.
not a general Flutter
Flutter
community thing.
But that is the developer's job, right? You've just described that is your promise to go figure out what is causing the problem and to then resolve that problem, right? You can't just say, why is it crashing? Because that's literally your job is to go figure out why it's crashing, right?
Now, this is where Stack Overflow comes in and you post code or the Google group for Flutter.
I do want to quickly answer this quickly. It is possible to build live wallpapers. Slack. Yes.
The Flutter community Slack has 17 or 18,000 people in it right now that can help you with something like that. Anyway, build Android live wallpaper.
Yes.
Question. How are you going to get the OS to use it as wallpaper? That's what I want to know.
No, it's already built in. You can just use method channels, and yes, you can. There you go. You can just render something. There's plenty of ways of doing that.
Come here.
Right.
Come here.
Okay. What's that sound in the background? That is Doggy.
And I have my Flutter puzzle hack pants on. I get all the coolest stuff.
Come on. Right. Time to go. Thanks, everyone. And we'll be around next week to help you with your questions.
We'll be here with Kevin Moore talking about using Flutter using Dart from one end to the other.
See you then. Bye, everyone.
By the way, the pants were made by my wife. They didn't come from the Flutter team.